On Christmas Day 2021, 24-year-old Mason Lubitz called 911 from his San Antonio, Texas home. He told the dispatcher that he had just shot and killed someone. When police arrived at the scene, they found the dead body of Lubitz's neighbor, 24-year-old U.S. Army National Guardsman Trevor Beeman, lying outside his apartment's front door. He had been shot 7 times. Lubitz told police he had acted in self-defense. Investigators quickly learned that Lubitz and Beeman had been feuding for several months. Lubitz had even called police about Beeman assaulting him and Beeman's girlfriend.
Right here, sir.
I don't want to be in here, man.
We gotta talk to you here. This is where the detective.
You put me in this small room.
Yeah, this is where the detective.
I don't want to be in here.
We have to.
You want me to talk?
Hey,
I don't want to be in
You
here.
don't have to
Hold on,
talk.
right here. We'll talk to
You
the
don't
detective.
have to talk.
You know what?
Put me in a bigger
How
room.
about we leave the door open for now? We'll talk to the detective.
I want a bigger room. I don't have to talk to you.
You're the detective.
I demand a bigger room.
Dude, we've been cool all this time, buddy. We've been cool all this time.
There we go.
You.
Right here, doors open. Officer Cruz by 1711.
Says the handcuffs are hurting
Stop.
Okay.
Doors open. I'm right here.
You sure the handcuffs are hurting? Right? Are they hurt? You want anything to eat, drink?
I want my dog.
I can't help you with that. I'll be straight.
He's alone at my house in Seguin.
In Seguin? Alright. When you talk to the detective, give him the...
I'm not talking to the detective unless I get my dog.
We don't have a means to get your dog, buddy.
Yeah.
Take me.
We'd have to call Seguin police.
Make it the happen.
Already.
The what?
I just killed somebody. You want me to talk? I want my f***ing dog.
Yeah, but we gotta know where we're going.
I want to say goodbye to my
I
dog.
don't know. No point, dude. Yeah. Dude, yeah.
This is not right.
Your dog's name is Roger?
What?
Those are monkeys, bitch.
Cough.
Whose dog's name is Roger?
My dog's name is Gilbert. Don't go get my dog.
We're not gonna go get you.
I don't want you shooting my dog or anything. He's fine. He's got food and water.
Sir, we're not gonna get
But I want to be with him.
We can't make that happen, sir. We have other issues at hand. We can't make that happen.
I just killed somebody! Make it happen! Figure it out!
Probably. Just a stand by.
You. I don't deserve this shit!
What's your name, brother?
You know my name!
I don't, because I've been here in the office the whole time. My name's Detective.
Stop with me! I told you my name 10
I
times!
haven't talked to you yet, man. I've been here in the office, dude. I've been here the whole time.
Stop fucking with me, man!
I'm not.
I've called you before!
No, I don't know who you are.
You're the fucking guy knew who I was, or don't you, detective?
Because I've never dealt with you before.
Well, then you suck, detective!
Why would
I tried to help your department!
With what?
Everything I knew!
Okay, well, I haven't talked to you before, and you haven't talked to me before.
You represent 911!
No, I don't. The communications that represents 911.
That's what I mean! Don't semantically with me!
Listen, that's what I'm trying to tell you, is that now just because you talk to one person in this department...
Take my cuffs off! I won't hurt you!
Okay, well, we need to calm down before we get to that point. With the way
I want water!
Okay,
I want my dog! I'm not calming down until I get my dog!
Okay, your dog...
You want me to calm down?
Your dog's at your
Then that's not my fucking name!
I don't know your name. That's why I just asked you.
How many fucking times do I have to tell you my fucking name? You sick...
Name.
My name is Mason Lubitz.
All right, Mason.
Mason Sayre Lubitz.
Okay.
I was born at Kaiser Permanente at 3 in the morning. I was supposed to amount to something. I'm not supposed to go to jail.
We never said you're going to jail. We're here to talk to you about what happened.
I already told you what happened.
You know, you haven't
And I didn't have to.
You didn't tell me anything. You're right. You do not have to.
And I've been through this before since my first rodeo.
Okay, I believe you.
And the last time my attorney told me, don't talk to the
You
cops.
don't have to if you don't want to.
I will talk to you.
Okay, well, I'm trying to talk to
I
you.
want my dog.
Your dog's at your apartment, not at your apartment.
He's at my townhouse.
Okay, townhouse, apartment, whatever it is. I haven't been out there, so I don't know what it is. I'm here to talk to you.
Take me in the car, get whatever approval you need. I answer whatever questions you want. We're going back to my townhouse. Get an animal control officer. Get Roger, my pastor. I'll answer any question you got without my attorney.
Your dog's at the apartment.
My dog is at the townhouse.
Is it a townhouse and apartment?
No,
You will
he
take
was at
me
an
there.
apartment. His dog's at a townhouse at Seguin's.
Oh, okay.
Don't go without me.
Who's at the townhouse in Seguin?
This is my dog.
Just your dog? There's nobody else there?
He's alone.
Okay. Do you live there or do you live here?
Both.
Both. Okay. All right. Well, that's fine. Like I said,
I lived there
talked to
until last night.
you. Okay.
Last night I put the AR in and I ran back in the apartment.
Hold on, time out, man. You say you want to talk to us or not? Because there's two different things you're telling me.
What?
There's two different things you're telling me.
I
You're
was
telling me
talking
you
to
want
you.
to talk to me without an attorney or no? Because you just told me that you don't want to talk about that an attorney. Last time you
I didn't
talked to
say
your
that.
last time you talked to your attorney, you said not to talk.
Oh,
to
he
police.
advised me that.
Okay.
I don't care. I'm not ashamed.
Okay. All right. Well.
I lift that up. I was allowed to go there with my AR.
Okay. I'm not.
I didn't break any laws.
Okay. Well, that's what you talked about.
I had every right to do what I did.
Okay. Well, let's talk about it then. We don't need to be real screaming at each other.
On my dog, man.
Okay. Well, your dog's in Seguin. We're not in Seguin. I can't go to Seguin.
Let's go. Yes, you can.
I can't.
Get a K9 guy.
The K9 officer.
I want to go to Seguin.
Okay. Those are all things we need to talk about, okay? But I can't talk to you unless you calm down for me.
If you want me to calm down, get me my
Your
dog!
dog's not going to be coming in here.
Why not?
Because he's not coming to the police station. But we can talk.
I have a muzzle for him!
Okay, listen.
He won't hurt you!
Okay, but he's in Seguin. He's 45 minutes away. So we're looking at least an
Don't you have 76 hours or something to hold me? I want my dog!
Okay, we're not bringing your dog here, bud. So it's not going to happen.
That's your decision.
Okay? Just hang tight. We got to do a couple things, and then we're going to come in.
Give me some water and take my cuffs off!
Well, with acting like this, we're not taking your cuffs off, but I can get you some water, all right?
Give me some water and take my cuffs off, please.
Okay. Once we start calming down, we can definitely talk about that. But I can get you some water.
I just killed somebody. You understand that?
Okay,
It's not Rainbow Six, motherfucker! Calm down! Calm down! I want my dog! Your department! I'm on you!
Okay, so there's a couple things we need to do. We're going to be taking GSR samples from your hand, and we're going to be...
I shot him, dude! It was me!
Okay, listen.
Not some other Mason!
Okay, listen, hold on.
I pulled the
We're
trigger!
taking GSR samples from your hands. We're going to be giving you some extra...
Good, then you take my fucking cuffs off. Take the GSR sample.
Okay. Okay, hold on. And we're going to get you... We obviously got water here. All right? Just give us a couple minutes. We gotta get this other officer to get back over here. So
I want my dog!
We'll get moving.
I'm not f***ing kidding, man. I want the dog unnegotiable.
Yeah, just take pictures as he is.
Make a call and make it happen. I'm not calling him on Christmas.
Let me just watch him real quick.
I'm not gonna do anything, man.
Alright, let me just see your left hand real quick. Just let your hand loose.
Okay. I'm not gonna do anything, man.
Okay. Here, watch out.
I promise. I can feel it. I can feel it.
Yeah. Doesn't hurt, it's just a little sticky toe.
Oh, the GSR. I thought you were checking.
No, you don't.
No, it's just GSR.
I shot him, dude. Retarded?
Do your right hand next.
What the f*** want, man? Just help me. You got the clothes and everything with GSR on it, you hard. Got naked for you, man. What the f*** do you need? Dude, I shot him! What's wrong with you?
Yeah. No, it's not anything else goes on.
Okay, I just need to take a few pictures of you real quick.
You.
I understand.
You want my dog?
Want to stand them up?
Listen, you want to stand up so we can take pictures of your face and in front of your body?
I want my dog.
I understand that. I told you what the limitations that we have.
Are you gonna make it happen for
I
me?
can't promise you that we can make it
Now
happen.
why should I cooperate for you?
I'm just trying to
Why should I make it easy for you?
I'm trying to talk to you. Because I know there's...
You f***ed my life up!
Listen,
Why should I help you?
Listen, what did I do to you?
Lie again!
When did I ever talk to you or investigate anything to do with you? I'm here to hear you out.
Don't f*** my head.
I'm here to hear you out.
Don't try to make me feel bad for you.
Okay?
It's not gonna work.
Before I told you my name, do you know who I am?
I'm pissed at your department.
For what? What did we do?
You let me down!
How?
I want you to help me!
What happened?
Everything!
And do you want to talk to me about what happened and what's going on?
I want my dog!
I understand that. I told you what I can do for your dog. Would you like to speak with us or no?
I told you yes!
Okay. So look, let's just take the picture so me and you can sit down here and talk like adults. Once he's done, then we can talk. That's it. We have to wait for him to get the pictures done. I can't talk to you until that's done.
Shake my hand.
Your hand's in handcuffs, man.
Shake my hand.
Alright? Let him finish the pictures.
Alright, all you gotta do is stand up. I'm just take a few pictures of the front of your face and your body, and that's it.
You. I asked for it to be looser.
I'm also, yeah, it's normally pretty quiet.
I'm not saying another thing until I eat my cuss in my water.
I don't see him.
Good. Alright, brother, go ahead and sit down. We can get you a towel.
Yeah.
Weird draw off or anything? Yeah, you don't need those on if you don't want them. Go sit, man. Let me wipe your face off. It's not alert.
Thank you.
Sit.
I don't care. Take my cuss off. I'm not gonna do anything.
I believe you. Want some of this water?
I want to drink it myself. Take my cuffs off.
Okay. Look. I'm the only
Open the door!
Listen, I'm the only
Take my cuffs
I
off!
don't want to hear what you. Okay? The officers that were out there, no, they're on here.
Open the door.
What do you need the door open for?
Makes me feel better.
Okay, you want the door open while we're talking?
And I want my cuffs off.
Okay. The way we're acting, I can't take the cuffs off right now.
The way I'm acting,
Yes.
I have respect for you.
I believe you.
There's a lot of out there that want to kill you for no reasons.
Okay,
Just like me.
we're not going off the deep end here, man. This is me and you talking. Okay, we're not talking about anything else.
If you take my cuffs
anything
off.
unrelated, anything.
You can beat the f out of me!
I don't need to.
Take my cuffs
Why would I
off!
want to do anything?
Exactly my point!
Why would I want to?
Are you afraid of me?
I don't want to get into a fight.
Just
with you.
take my... I'm not gonna fight you, bro!
The way you're acting tells me different, brother.
At least loosen them, dude.
Okay.
Cuff me in front. How about that?
I can't do that. I can loosen them a little bit.
Okay.
Which one's hurting? This one or this one?
The left is more hurting.
This one's hurting you?
Yes. A lot more.
Get your hands apart.
Is it tighter or?
No, apart.
I don't have to talk to you, man.
You're right, you don't. Is that better?
More.
Okay. That's more better, or you need a
More room, dude.
more loose?
Yes, dude. Fuck. This is your problem, dude.
I'm trying to accommodate you, bud.
Not really.
There you go.
You.
All right. Listen, you came down here in a police car.
The right.
You're
I want
under
the right
arrest.
looser. I want the right
Okay,
less
well, hold
too.
on. You.
No, I
Get
want
in
the
police
right
car.
less
All right.
too. I want the right more free.
The right is loose too.
Loosen it more, officer.
This one?
Yeah, that's the right one, isn't it?
This one's hurting you too? We got 2 fingers I can
I want them looser, sir. I am not a f***ing threat to you. And the way you guys have been f***ing treating me is f***ed up. Did everything right.
All right, man. So like I said, you came down here in a police car. You're in handcuffs. I got to read your Miranda rights before I can even talk to you. You understand that? Okay. Before you ask any questions, it is my duty as a police officer to advise you of your rights and to warn you of the consequences of waiving these rights. You have the right to remain silent. You do not have to make any statement, oral or written, to anyone. Any statement that you make will be used in evidence against you in a court of law or after trial. You have a right to have a lawyer present to advise you before and during any questioning by police officers or attorneys representing the state. You may have your own lawyer present, or if you're unable to employ a lawyer, the court will appoint a lawyer for you free of charge now or any other time. If you decide to talk with anyone, you can, and you can stop talking to them at any time you want. The above rights are continuing rights, which can be urged by you at any stage of the proceedings. Do you understand that? Okay. Knowing your rights, do you want to talk to me?
Go out my dog.
Okay, and I told you what I can do and can't do for your dog.
Make
Right?
it happen.
Your dog's an hour and a half away.
No,
Okay.
he's not.
Yeah, Seguin's 45 minutes from here,
Yeah.
right? So 45 minutes. And
You
45
get
minutes.
76 hours or something to hold me, don't you?
Okay, listen. I'm here to talk to you now. Okay.
I'm here to talk to you, stupid.
Okay, I told you what I can and can't do for your dog. I can't go to Seguin to get your dog.
Yes, you can.
No, I cannot.
I don't have to talk to you.
You don't. That's why I'm
I want
asking
my
you
dog.
if you would like to speak with me.
I want my dog.
I understand. What I can, I told you what I can and can't do for you for your dog. I can't go get your dog for you.
Then find somebody.
We're not going to send a police officer to Seguin for a dog.
Let's go, you and me. Let's go.
I cannot go to Seguin for you
Why not?
because I can't. So I'm here. This is my job is here in San Antonio.
Okay, I want my lawyer.
Okay. So you don't
I
want.
want my lawyer!
That's fine.
You!
Go ahead. Take off. The door's right here.
Want this water?
No, I'm not going to get the water because you're leaving now.
You don't get to do that to me. Treat me like a f***ing human.
Okay. You have a good day, sir. All right, guys.
You. You!
I don't know if they're outside yet. They won't make it up here. Where's it gonna be at? They won't make it up here? Too low. I think they'll make it up here. No? Okay, bring them across the street far. We're leaving? Yeah.
So
Just
nice.
cancel. We're gonna just do it ourselves.
So
Yes, 10-4.
Alright, so you step up for me.
yes, sir.
Time to go like you said.
I don't get the water.
No, I don't have no water, sir.
Yeah, when you go
We're
get
gonna
it.
go where you want her to go.
I think we should go get it.
Despite his claims of self-defense, Lubitz is charged with murder. If found guilty, he faces up to 99 years in prison. At trial, Trevor's father, James Beeman, is called to testify, as he had witnessed the fatal encounter. His statements proved to be a focal point of the defense's argument that this is a case of self-defense.
So let's talk a little bit about your son, where he was living, Obviously, on the event of the day, you were physically there as well, right? On December 25th?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
You went over to your son's apartment. Who else was with you?
You said who else was
Yeah,
it?
who else lived with Trevor?
His girlfriend Madison and his uncle Howard, which is his uncle's a little over a year older than him, so they're more friends than uncle. But yeah, so Howard and Trevor and Madison share the
Howard's
property.
your brother?
Sorry?
Howard is your brother?
He's my brother-in-law. He's my wife's brother.
And how long have they been living together?
I don't recall. I would maybe under a year, because Howard was here attending UTSA, getting his graduate degree. So while he was doing that, maybe around a year. That's kind of my best guess.
But your family was really close, right?
Extremely close, yes.
You guys would always meet up as much as possible.
Right, every holiday, occasional cookouts and whatnot, but yes.
And Trevor was very close with his uncle.
Uncle Howard?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
They are only a year apart, you said. Are they almost like siblings?
We have pictures of them growing up from little tiny kids, always hanging out. They were extremely close.
We're going to talk about meeting up to it. Did you ever meet the defendant?
I did.
How did that come about?
We had to get together at the house, and we were doing some landscaping. I had Trevor and Howie come out. I would always float them a couple bucks if they wanted to help out. And he had mentioned the defendant was willing to help her. He invited him out as well. So I don't know the exact time of that.
When you had him out at your place?
Correct. He was at our house.
Where do you live?
Out in New Braunfels.
In the Braunfels area.
Yes, sir.
Were you able to talk to him at all while they were doing the job? Did you have him working for you?
No, because everything was done, because he arrived afterwards, so everything was pretty much done. But I think since maybe he was already on his way, because it's a good probably for the grill and cooked out.
Do you remember any conversations with him other than just a simple introduction?
Just everyday talk, where are you from? Nothing out of the ordinary that I recall.
But you'd be able to identify him?
Yes.
Do you see him in the courtroom?
Yes, sir.
Would you point to him and identify him by an article of clothing that he's wearing?
Yes, sir. Right there, wearing a gray suit, blue tie, maybe a pink shirt.
Let the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant. His gray suit.
We'll sit down. Yeah,
So in December, what was your family's Christmas plans?
Trevor wanted to host it at his apartment. It's always at our house just because it's bigger and more room. But that particular year, he wanted to host it, kind of show off his apartment, and so we were definitely for it.
Okay. And who was all included in this plan that was going to go over to the apartment?
Sure, yes, sir. There was myself, my daughter, my wife, my sister-in-law, her husband, and their daughter. That's who was coming down.
At the time, how old was your daughter?
My daughter at the time was probably a sophomore in college, so 21, maybe 2021.
And you said your sister-in-law and brother-in-law?
Correct.
How old was their daughter?
She at the time, years ago, five maybe, about 5. A bunch of gifts, and to go up and just eat, play games, open gifts. Every tradition, every year I buy $100 in dollar scratchies, so we kind of play games every year to see who gets the most lotto tickets, to see if anybody hits big on it. So that's kind of our tradition, but that would have been the extent of it.
It's kind of a chill Christmas,
Yes, sir.
celebrating.
As every Christmas is. It would have been no different. It was just at Trevor's place.
When did you all arrive at Trevor's place?
If I recall, I want to say around maybe 9 a.m., a little after. We weren't in a super big hurry to get down there, so it was mid-morning-ish.
And when you arrived, what was the first thing you guys did?
Walked over to figure out where his apartment was, because we weren't exactly sure, because none of us had never been there before.
Okay.
And then just basically walked around the complex until we could find out where his actual apartment was.
Once you found it, what did you get? Load all the gifts into the house?
Well, there was quite a bit, because we had a lot of presents. As we were unloading my car, my sister-in-law and her husband, they pulled up next to us. So there was, if I recall, there was maybe 3 to 4 trips in and out. We probably went in and out of the door over 40 times, because we had food, hot food, that you can only take one of. And there was the 6 of us that were going in and out.
After you got that 15 minutes of loading all the stuff in, what did you guys do?
Started making some coffee, eating, and getting ready to open gifts.
Okay. Did you guys actually get to open gifts?
We did. Yes, sir. We opened them for a little bit, and then that's when we decided to play some games for some lotto tickets.
And did you play the games at that point?
No, never got to that. No, sir.
Okay. At that part, what happened?
So after we were opening gifts, we decided to play games. We're going to clean up a little bit. My sister-in-law and her husband were going to take some of the open gifts down to their car. And then that time, Trevor decided that he wanted to take his dog out to the bathroom.
Okay. What was Trevor wearing?
I remember him wearing, I want to say it was sweatpants, and then for a shirt, it was a shirt, one of my old t-shirts. It was like a dry fit, real thin, like tight-fitting t-shirt type thing.
Did he happen to change when you guys showed up, or was that the stuff he was wearing when you woke up?
That's what he was wearing the whole time. Just sweatpants and a t-shirt.
Was he wearing anything on his feet?
On his what?
His feet.
His feet.
Yeah.
I don't know if he had slides on. I don't, because he was he always wore slides a lot. And I don't think he had shoes on. I think he was barefoot in his slides, but I don't quite recall.
All right. But you said he was going to take the dog out to do the dog's business, I assume.
Yes, sir.
What did you do at this time?
So like I said, my sister-in-law, brother-in-law, they walked out the door, and Trevor followed out after them. And then I was probably about maybe 10 paces behind Trevor, because I knew he was going to go out by himself, and that's our time to, kind of catch up. I can hang out with him for a few minutes.
Okay.
And
do you recall what the entryway looked like?
His entryway? I do.
Could you explain it for us?
Sure. So if you're coming into his home, it's the door opens and swings to the left, which there was an entrance there to go back to the bedroom and a bathroom, and it basically opens up to a wide living room. And then immediately to the right, it's kind of like an L-shaped. There's like a little breakfast nook dining area. And then in the back of that, it's kind of an elongated kitchen. And then as you walk through his door at the 1 o'clock position, you could look into his bedroom. So you can kind of see a majority of the apartment as you first enter the apartment.
And his apartment was on which floor is his apartment on?
Second floor.
Second floor. And how were the stairs situated going up to his apartment?
So they favored his side. When you go up the steps, immediately to the top of the steps, if you take maybe a step to the left, would be his door. And if you go to the right and then walk down a common patio, would be the defendant's door, and the doors face one another.
So they're neighbors.
Yes.
And if you saw a sketch of this, would that help you kind of describe how the events went forward?
Yeah, sure. I don't think I mean, it's ingrained in my head, the layout of his apartment and the steps and whatnot, but if it's easier for everybody else, that's fine.
Would you be able to explain to the jury kind of the orientation of this set of stairs in apartments?
Yes, slightly below the circled letter C, that would represent the bottom of the steps. And then going up that long rectangle would be the steps. And then at the top where it says second floor landing, Trevor's apartment door would be immediately to the left. And then the defendant's would be to the right, I don't know, maybe 10 feet or so, maybe.
And you said that your son's was on the left, looking at this right now.
Correct. Number 3.
Where would the doorway be explained in that sketch?
So the doorway would be, apartment 324, and the doorway would be right there to the left of the number 2 on second floor. That would swing into the left.
So is this the area that the door would be for your son?
That's correct.
So these brackets would show the doorways?
Probably the door frame or something.
And that's where it was oriented?
Yes.
And then the defendants would be oriented directly across?
Correct. Because they seem like a mirror door of one another.
Windows directly in front, would you say would you say what this would represent?
Yeah, that would be Trevor's window in his little dinette area.
All right, and then these windows on this side?
I don't recall there being windows. I don't recall windows on that side.
But these here are the stairs, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then a short landing in between the two?
Yes, sir.
You said that you followed your son out a few paces behind him.
Yes, sir.
How far behind do you think you were in relation to the stairs?
So he was probably just starting down the steps
When you started coming out?
when I started coming out, because I could see him walking because of the open concept of his apartment. So I just kind of walked at that 45, like I was coming out of his bedroom, straight to the door to follow him out.
Okay. And when you got out of the apartment, how far ahead of him? How far ahead was your son?
Yeah, so he was ahead of me the whole time.
Okay.
I would say half of the stair length, maybe, but
So he was
70
one half
paces.
ahead of where you were walking, both of you going down.
Sure, I started coming out as he was headed down, and then when I started down the steps, I would say he was probably About halfway, maybe a little more than halfway, because he never stopped. He just kept, despite the yelling, he just never stopped. He just kept walking down the steps.
Okay. So now at this point, when you're out there, what happened that was unusual for a Christmas morning?
Well, before I got out, well, as soon as Trevor stepped out, that's when I heard the screaming and yelling. And I originally thought, it was maybe a joke or something, because that just seemed odd for somebody to start screaming and yelling like that.
Well, can you explain what you mean by like that?
Well, I mean, he's got a loud voice, or it seemed to be loud at that time, and all I heard was, I effing hate you, you ruined my life, but over and over, just, I effing hate you, is what I recall him yelling. And then...
Where were you at that time?
Just before I walked out the door.
Okay.
So Trevor would have been toward the top of the steps.
All right, and then what happened?
I remember looking over and seeing the defendant. His face was just purple. I mean, he was obviously visibly upset. And that's when I knew it wasn't a joke. So we continued walking down the steps. Trevor eventually got to the bottom of the steps. And I was about halfway, and he transitioned. First it was, I effing hate you, you were in my life. And then it transitioned to, what I felt his ill regard toward Madison. I don't want to be your friend.
We'll get in that. We'll get into that. But you were halfway down the stairs when you think you transitioned from just insulting your son.
Correct.
Okay. And you said that Trevor was all the way to the bottom when it transitioned?
Correct.
Okay. Now let's get into the transition of the difference. When you got halfway down, what was that difference in yelling?
It was the same tone, same yelling. It switched from yelling at Trevor, to him saying how he never wants to be friends with Madison, or I never want to be your friend again. I'll never trust you again. Just yelling, obviously for her to receive that message, or to him to receive that message of his feelings toward her. I don't know. He just transitioned to Madison.
And it's been a few years, right?
Served 3 years.
Could you relate to us all of the things that he said up to this point?
So there was a lot of I hate yous, a lot of I effing hate you. Then it was the transition to the Madison. Trevor was still at the bottom of the steps. He wasn't. He stayed down there, and then he focused his behavior toward me, not to yell at me like directly, like he had an ill feeling toward me. He just said, whenever you were robbed, your son robbed you. He said that a few times, and it struck me. I'm like, I've never been robbed before. And at that point is when, Trevor had enough, because he obviously had focused his attention on me. And I don't know if it was embarrassing for Trevor that somebody's yelling at his dad at his house or what. I don't know.
But let's talk about that, about your son.
Mm-hmm.
You said all the way down, being yelled at, but when he directed it at you, is when your son's behavior changed, and he stopped continuing to go water the dog or whatever.
Right. So as soon as he focused it, his yelling at me, that's when Trevor went up the steps.
Okay. Now your son's temperament. You're his father,
Yes.
Would you kind of describe a little bit about that?
Yeah, he's always a jokester, happy kid, but like anybody else, I imagine to a point, you're only going to take so much. I mean, I'll admit I was a little frustrated with it, but I could ignore it. I mean, I had no relationship with this man, and I could easily just slough it off. But I don't know if based on their history, if there's just a shorter temper with that. I don't know.
Okay. But your son has a temper?
I wouldn't say he's like a hot-headed temper guy. I wouldn't say that. I mean, everybody has a temper.
But you do think that the things the defendant was saying to you and to your son made your son go back up the stairs?
I think when he focuses attention to me, I think that's what.
Subject to speculation on that.
Response sustained.
And Your Honor, may I have an instruction disregard to the jury?
The juror disregard the last testimony.
Defense position for this trial to preserve the jury.
It's denied.
Right. You told us how that the defendant made a transition to yelling "you," and then, in the sequence of events, your son started heading back up the stairs. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
At that point, what happened?
Because I eventually made my way down to the bottom of the steps, so I was standing completely at the bottom of the stairway at this time because I had kept walking. Let me clarify that. So we passed each other on the steps, but I kept walking down the steps to the bottom. So I was physically standing at the bottom of the steps. And then he rounded the corner. I think that at that time the defendant probably figured he was coming to his door, and the door slammed. And then, Trev walked up to the door, extended like he was going to knock, but his hand wasn't high. I didn't see like a knock in the door.
Why didn't you see?
Well, there's a cross member on the railing, but I don't think I was too focused on his hand to see if he would knock or not.
What did Trevor do with the dog on his way up?
I don't know what happened to the dog.
Okay,
Unfortunately.
don't worry about it. You said you were standing. You made it to the.
I was
bottom
on the sidewalk, right? I was completely off the stairs.
Just like 10, 14 steps down.
It would be to the right of the steps immediately, all up there, and then all the way to the right,
All the way to the right.
and then it attaches to the house.
Okay, so your view of this event, you're standing around here, around the Cias?
No, I'm to the right at the bottom of the steps. I kind of have the railing in the center.
Okay,
of
so
it.
you're standing right by the railing.
Yes, but on the sidewalk itself, yes, sir.
And so there's railing up,
Yes.
and you said there was a railing obstructing some of the view.
Right, so there's a top rail, a bottom rail, and then, if I recall, there's slats, metal slats, if I recall.
James, what is this?
It looks like their common porch.
Okay. And so, in relation to this, is this a fair and accurate depiction of their porch that day?
How I recall it, yes, sir.
Okay. And you would have been standing in relation to this, and so your son would have been thereby been where?
To the right, on the right-hand side, as he approached the defendants.
Is that what you're talking about, obstructions?
Yeah, I thought it was the railing itself, but yeah, I don't recall. That's weird. I just don't recall anything hanging on it from that day.
So, getting back to the sequence of events, you're at the bottom, your son is close to the defendant's door, he raises his hand. And what happened then?
So I remember him leaning forward, like I said, like he was going to knock. I guess I didn't focus on exactly where his hand was. But then that's when the door opened, so I just made the assumption that he opened it.
So you told the officer on scene that your son opened the door?
Yeah, that was the assumption that I had, because it pretty much opened at the time.
Okay.
I think, his hand would hit the door.
From that angle, could you see whether the door was cracked open or all the way open?
No, sir, I don't recall that.
So you thought that because of your son walking that way, he opened?
That was my assumption, yes, sir.
At this point, what happened?
The door, I remember it opening a little bit. It could open all the way from my point of view, actually, but I know the door opened, and then because he was still a step away, so he took another step, toward the door like he was going to go inside.
Okay. And what did he say? What did your son say?
I said something along the effect, like, you want smacked, or do you want smacked, or talking smack, something of that effect, because it wasn't very loud. I sensed that the defendant was right there next to him.
Well, Your Honor, I'm not going to object to speculation as far as what he could sense. He can't see.
Okay, it's overruled.
Your son said something to the defendant.
Yes, sir.
And then, was it before or after the door opened, or while the door was opening?
I would say the door was probably opened at that point. Yes.
And he took another step as if to go into the apartment.
Yes.
And what happened now?
So when he took the step, I imagine, 5 to 10 seconds later is when I heard the 3 shots. I didn't realize, I thought they were fireworks at first, because it was so loud I couldn't tell exactly where they were coming from. I knew they were coming from that area. And then Trevor dropped, like almost in a fetal position, straight down, and then went straight on his back.
So he immediately dropped.
Yes.
When he's still standing outside the door when he dropped.
Yes.
And so the body settled on this diagram. Where would you say? He said fell into the fetal position. Would you be able to tell the jury where?
Right. So under that red thing is where he was probably standing, and then that's when he just kind of fell backwards from there.
And he fell backwards into the fetal
Well,
position?
right. So he went straight down and then kind of rolled backwards onto his back.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
You said you were in combat missions, correct?
Yes.
Have you ever seen anyone get shot before?
Yes.
And the people, were they shot and killed in front of you?
From a distance, yes.
Have you seen the way a dead body falls when a person's been killed?
Yeah, I suppose I have, yes.
Would you be able to explain to the jury the difference between movies and real life when people are shot and killed and how they fall?
Objector.
It's overruled.
Can I answer that?
Yes.
I think the movies just kind of sexy it up, I guess you could say, to make it look dramatic and action, but in reality, you know, when the shots are, when they hit their intended shot, it's just not a good thing to see just drop.
But do the bullets send the bodies flying?
Not necessarily. I mean, you're talking high. I mean, if you have a high caliber bullet, you know, like a 50 cal or something like that, then sure.
But with lesser caliber bullets?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not going to make you jolt and run backwards or something. No, I mean, you're just going to absorb it.
And did your son go flying back when he was shot?
No, and matter of fact, I didn't know he was shot because he didn't move. That's why I was originally confused. I didn't realize what it was until I seen him fall, and then I knew that they were gunshots at that time.
And that's when you knew the difference between fireworks and gunshots when your son fell?
Yes, sir.
At this point, what happened?
So once it quickly, set in what happened, you know, I remember getting in a ready run position because I wanted to run up the steps. But I couldn't because the door was open, and there was no way I could run up the steps. So I was just standing there.
When you say the door was open, you're speaking of the defense door still?
Correct, yes, sir. And then there was two more shots. You know, when Trevor was laying on his back, you know, on the porch. A couple seconds later, there came two more shots.
Okay, so after the initial shots,
Mm-hmm.
your son's on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Shots while he's laying on the ground.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, you go a little bit more into that. What did you observe, if anything, from the defendant?
So at that point, I mean, it was shocking. So I think, you know, that's when you just process and things just start getting ingrained into your head. I remember, you know, seeing the beginning of the defendant, like his gun in the front of his body and the door in his doorway. As he fired the two shots, he kept running. What I recall, he stood over him and he just yelled because he was obviously furious. And at that point, I thought he was going to run in, you know, to my son's door because the door was open. It was propped open, and my entire family was in there at that point. And I remember thinking, can I run? Can I make it up to these steps in time? And I know I couldn't. So basically, I froze. And then, you know, the defendant, he just basically walked back in his apartment, shut his door. At that point, do you want me to continue or
let's go into that. That's okay. The area. So you said he fired two more shots and was screaming at your son's body.
Yeah, it's just like not like FUs or what. He was just screaming.
Okay. And did he say anything to you?
No.
Okay, so at that point, he went back into his apartment and shut the door?
He did.
And what did you do?
At that point, I ran up the steps as fast as I could. And as I got to the top of the steps to round the steps to get to Trevor, then he had opened his door again.
So let's stop there. Just one more thing. Did the defendant have to move your son's body?
No.
To close the door?
No.
He just slammed it shut?
Yes.
Okay. And you ran up the stairs?
Yes, sir.
You said you were going to go to your son?
Yes, sir.
Let's continue from that. What happened next?
I got to the top of the steps. Excuse me. When I rounded the railing, I looked down and I immediately, you know, I didn't see my fair share of dead people, unfortunately. I knew he was gone. His eyes were just halfway open, and he was just completely limp. I didn't see his chest rising or nothing. I don't know how much time I observed him because everything seemed to happen so fast. But I've been in those close combat shootouts scenarios. You have to triage people, and it's unfortunate when a father's got to triage his own son to save the rest of the family. But I remember looking down at him, and as I was looking down at him, the defendant opened the door again. He screamed how he hated him, and I remember crouching down and putting my hands up. I'm like, and he was standing like in his door, and he kind of reached out and he kicked his leg, and he said, "Get him out of here." And I was just trying to reason with him, by saying, "Okay, stop, go back inside." And he was standing there with his gun. He didn't point it at me or anything. And then he just went into his apartment and shut the door. And I knew Trevor was gone. But then at that point, I ran in the apartment, Trevor's apartment. I remember grabbing the door with my left hand and slamming it behind me. And it was chaos in the house. Everybody was running and screaming.
So at this point, what is your main objective?
To let my son go, and to save the rest of my family.
So you couldn't go over to the body, you needed to save the rest
No.
of the family?
No. There was no saving him.
So what do you do at this point?
I remember walking in the house. My niece was screaming. Everybody was just in a panic. And my brother-in-law Howard, I said, "I know you guys have a gun in the house. I need you to get it." And I tried to get everybody back because of that. In the close quarter combat scenario, when I've been trained for that stuff. There's no match. The gun that I had, the 9mm that I had, there's no match with an AR. And
By the gun that you had, you mean?
The one that Howard brought me.
Okay, so your son had a gun in his apartment?
He did, yes sir. So he brought me I think it was a 9mm silver handgun. Howard handed me the clip and the gun. And I remember looking at the magazine and feeling the weight. I could see that it had bullets in it. I put the magazine in and I racked it. And when I racked it, a round came out of the chamber and it landed in the middle of the living room floor. And I remember thinking, do they realize that this gun was loaded? I don't know if they thought it may have been unloaded, but maybe they wanted to store it that way. I don't know. So like I said, in that type of scenario, you either want to face and fight the enemy, or you want to break contact with it. And I knew I did show some ill regard toward Madison. I thought he would come kicking the door, so I got everybody out to their back patio to egress. And my wife said, it's too high, we can't get out. So I said, everybody get into the back bedroom, as far as we could away. I had everybody laying down. And
did you direct them to do anything else at this time?
My family?
Yes.
To stay in that back bedroom and get down. And I think I may have told my niece or daughter to go get in the bathtub, because that would offer some protection, because they had their own bathtub. Because those walls they're not any match for a high caliber round like that. And then my best defense was as close as I could be to the door. If he decided to kick it in, the shortest barrel kind of wins. Because you have to, with an AR, you've got a big barrel to maneuver. With a 9mm, you don't. So
you, considering that, everybody is in the back room, as safe as you can make them. Where did you go at this point?
So once everybody's in the back, I retreated to my son's bedroom because he had the window that you showed. Well, he's got that window right there that I could see through. So if there was any movement going in front of that window, I would have stepped up to the door and engaged at that point, because it was maybe 3 steps away, from his bedroom door to that.
Did anybody end up walking in front of that window?
No, the only movement that was there, I think my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law's husband, I can't remember if he called me or I called him, because I knew he was outside. And I remember putting my phone down on speakerphone, because at this time I was just in go mode at that point. I don't recall being scared or angry. I just know that he's down. Yes, sir. We can't break contact. We have to fortify at this point. So I'm just kind of using the resources that I had. And then, my brother-in-law, they were outside so they could see, the door. And I said, okay. I said, let me know if you see his door open, because that would give me a few more seconds. Because if I see movement in front of that window and he kicked it in, that would be tight for me to engage. But, my brother-in-law, if he would have seen him coming out, I could have moved to that, the door closer, faster. And I just kept him on the phone. I said, let me know if you see any movement. And he was just giving me a constant feedback with what's going on. There's no movement. The cops are here. I think he said the medical folks were here. And I said, you tell me when people are coming up them steps, because, if somebody comes through that door, I'm going to shoot. So he's like, nope, there's police coming up. And I seen the movement, of the police officers. So I knew it was the police officers. I still had my gun aimed toward them. And then let's
talk about this time. You were aware that somebody had called 911?
Yeah, and I think I may have even screamed, somebody call 911. Yeah.
And so your brother-in-law was taking presents out.
With my sister-in-law, the two of them. Yes.
And you're waiting, and he's there to kind of watch the door and let you know when the police arrive.
Yes.
Was it a very long wait?
Seemed like eternity. I don't know. Maybe it'd be a guess, honestly. It just seemed like it took forever, because I was just afraid he's going to come in and shoot the place up.
Yeah. Okay, so you were directed by your brother-in-law that the police have arrived, so that you know not to shoot whoever's coming in front of the window.
Yes.
What did you do at this point?
I still held my position. I still kept everybody down. And I believe my brother-in-law said there's a SWAT team coming, which made sense. And somebody there that's used a gun, which still seemed like eternity. He told me the SWAT team was there. They're coming up the steps. I said, please confirm with them that, they don't come into our apartment. He's like, no, they know exactly where they're going. And I could see them lining up outside the window. And I honestly expected maybe a shootout. So at that time I told my family, continue to lay flat on the ground. I too got down into a prone position. I still kept my gun, aimed toward the door, because these guys are going in on it's a nasty gun. An AR is a nasty gun. And I wasn't sure if they would need backup, so I just kept my gun charged on the door.
Did you follow your training?
I did. Then I think they kicked it in. You could hear all the commotion. And then when I knew, my brother-in-law said they had him in handcuffs. At that point, I got up. I ejected the magazine, ejected the round out of the chamber. I set them down on a little nightstand next to the front door. And I turned around and I grabbed my daughter and my wife into a huddle, and I told them that Trevor was gone. I did not tell them that he was gone already, because I think they assumed he may have still been alive, and I didn't, because they would have ran out there. I know they would have run out there, and that would have changed. That would have changed my whole posture. I would have had to have gone on the offense, and I would have probably had to enter his apartment or something. I don't know. I could not have them out there. And then the cops just took over the investigation from there. This is so senseless.
I'm very sorry. I do have a few more questions before I pass you over to the.
Yes, sir. I understand.
As far as your size goes in comparison to your son, how tall are you?
5'9".
And your son, how tall was he?
5'2", maybe, less shorter.
A lot smaller than you are?
Yes.
So in the photo that's in evidence of you two together, you weren't like standing on a platform or anything, that's your actual size comparison?
Yes, sir.
We talked a little bit about your son, what he was wearing, what he had with him when you went out. Is there any way, with what he was wearing, anyone would think he had a gun on? Did he have a gun on?
No, he had like I said, sweatpants, the dry fit shirt. I mean, it was tight. I mean, you would easily see if anybody had anything, on them, because it would really deform the shirt. And there's no way.
But you knew that he did own one.
He did, absolutely.
And
yes.
you had your brother-in-law get it. Do you know where he got it from out of the apartment?
I don't. I thought he ran to the left, from the front door, which is his room. But I don't.
You don't know.
I don't exactly recall.
When you came out of the door, you said the defendant was yelling as you were about to step out, following your son.
Yes.
How much of your son's body could you see? Sorry. How much of the defendant's body could you see at that point? The doors are both open.
When he was initially yelling?
Yes.
It was basically only his head, like maybe his chest up, because the door was an open end to the left for him, like he was just kind of doing this number, peeking out. So not his whole body, but I only recall, probably seeing his upper section and his head. I just remember the purple face of anger. That's all I really focused on. I didn't focus anything else.
Did you just see his face?
Yeah, I 100% seen his face. Yes,
and so was he leaning around his door? So you didn't see the rest of his body? Is the door blocking the rest of the body?
That I recall, yes. During all of the screaming, yes.
So you wouldn't have seen anything he was holding at that time?
No, sir.
The state will pass the witness.
Yes, Your Honor, may I proceed?
Yes.
Mr. Bean, my name is Jason Goss. I'm one of the attorneys who represents Mason, and I understand how hard. I can't, but I can imagine how hard it is for you. No matter how or what was the cause of losing your son, having that happen in front of you, I'm sure it's traumatic. And so I say that to say I have to ask you questions.
I understand, sir.
And I'm sorry about it. I don't mean to offend you.
No,
There may be hard questions about your
Yes,
son,
sir.
there may be hard questions about some of the things that happened. And I'd just like you to understand that up front.
I do.
So first, I kind of want to get an idea about, like with the prosecutors. So we've seen some exhibits and some other things. Could you give a roundabout over 3 years how many times you've met with the DA's office, with the lawyers for the DA's office?
So once, like over a Zoom call, that was quite a while ago. And then last week was the first time I recall ever like sitting down face to face with them.
Sure, and I mean, I'll make it clear, there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's pretty normal to talk to your witnesses, but as far as like, for instance, you know that we started the trial today. Did you talk to anybody, because you weren't in the courtroom for opening statement, did you talk to anybody about my opening statement? Or did they say anything to you about it?
No, sir.
Well, I'd like to go over memory a little bit. Obviously, you have been, and you talked about some of your training. You would agree that some of your training has to do with not only being able to act in the moment, but also to describe what happened in the immediate aftermath to superiors or to anybody else who needs that information.
Sure.
Right?
Yes, sir.
So you've been trained at a kind of a height level of observation, but also to remember those details, to give it to the people who need it, to explain what happened in the immediate aftermath of something like this.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Okay. And the reason I say this because you would also agree that your memory on all of this was fresher the day it happened than it is 3 years later. Right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and sometimes the questions I'm asking, it may sound like statements, but I'm putting a question mark.
Okay.
Just, I don't know, that's probably my fault, but I'm sorry. But yeah, so whatever happens, like at the moment, and then you're describing it, you would expect that you're remembering those details better then than 3 years later.
No. Maybe I don't know. It depends. I guess to me, I think it depended on how traumatic it was for you.
Sure.
You know, because your mind does try to connect the dots. Yes.
Well, I some things, it's kind of like you said, can be, I guess, burned in your memory, and you can still remember it well, but you're still remembering it as well as you did when it happened.
Yes.
You agree with that?
Sir.
And really, what I'm trying to get to is that your memory doesn't usually get better with age. For human beings, it gets worse.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And somebody like you, especially who has been trained specifically to in the immediate aftermath, to be able to calmly and precisely relay your observations about what happened. Right?
As best as you can, like I said, depending on the traumatic event. Yes.
And so as we go through that, you talked to a detective Henning that day. You went down to the station and you spoke to him about everything that you saw and everything.
Yes, sir.
I want to talk about Christmas because one of the things that you told the jury, and one of the things that you mentioned is that this was the first time you had ever been to Trevor and Howard's apartment.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
The first time for your wife, the first time for your other family.
All of us that went there that day. Yes.
And that's because Trevor's apartment is relatively small.
It is small. It was small.
Compared to the house that you had in the front.
Sure, yes.
I mean, we don't have to go too far into it, but I mean, about how big is the office?
It's 4.
And living areas and everything else. So would you say it's 2 or 3 times the size of the apartment or more?
Sure.
And the only reason I ask that is because I think you also said that this was the first time ever that Trevor had not gone to where you are for Christmas, or where your family is.
Yeah, it's always, from what I recall, it's always at our house.
And which I think makes sense. Your house can accommodate your family, you guys are comfortable there, Trevor's comfortable there. It's one of those things. Normally every year that's what would happen.
Yes.
So, and my point being, if somebody, so the expectation, if every year that's what happens, the expectation is that that year Trevor would be with you rather than you guys all come and try to cram into that apartment.
Yes.
Right. But this year, because y'all have made that, Trevor said I want to host or whatever, y'all made the decision to all go to that apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
And so that's why everybody was there on Christmas Day.
Correct.
You talked about it in the photo, you said, I guess, you said that was Trevor's enlistment in the Army?
Correct.
Was Trevor, did he end up being discharged from the Army?
No, he was still in the Army up until the day he was shot.
Okay, and so he was in the regular Army? No?
Guards. He was a guardsman. Guard.
Okay, understood. And as far as going back to Christmas, you talked about the fact you guys arrived at about 9 o'clock. What time about would you say that Trevor starts bringing the dog out and you start walking out?
I would say maybe around 11.
11.
And that is honestly a rough guess. I really don't recall the exact time.
And the reason, well, I guess first the dog had to go out, and I think you guys all told Maddie to take the dog out, or wanted Maddie to take the dog out, but she wouldn't wake up. You remember that?
No, she was up.
Okay.
No,
So you don't remember saying, you don't remember ever telling the police officer that she was asleep and.
No, they were asleep when we first arrived.
Okay.
Because we were acting a fool because the door was locked and we were trying, hey, come on, get up. But yeah, she was slow getting up. She may have still been asleep, but I don't recall them trying to get her up out of bed to take the dog out, I guess is what I'm saying.
Sure. I mean, but with something like that, if you had said it before, that would be, your memory would have been fresher about that than it is 3 years later.
Yeah, and yeah, I think she still was asleep. She was the tough one to get up that morning.
Right. And as far as Trevor, so I'm going to ask this because you may or may not know, but do you know now that Trevor was high on cocaine at the time that all this happened?
No.
Did you know that he was a cocaine user?
No.
Did you see any signs or evidence of that use that morning?
No, I have never, because he would know I would come unglued.
Well, sure, I imagine.
You know.
So I guess, is it safe to say that there are parts and aspects of Trevor that you did not know about?
I definitely didn't know about that.
Right. And I don't mean that to disrespect you. That came out with the autopsy and everything else. So I'm not just saying something to say it, just so that you understand that. And I wouldn't try to disrespect you with it. But additionally, he was intoxicated almost to the legal limit. So it's like a .067. Did you, were you guys drinking that morning, or did you see Trevor drinking?
No, because he was still, they were all still asleep when we got there. I didn't see him drinking anything, no, sir.
Okay. So between the hours of I guess 9 and maybe 11 something when you're walking the dog, were you always around Trevor? Did you always see everything he was doing?
Yeah, well, not every second. I mean, we're all in the common area because it's all kind of an open concept. But to my knowledge, I mean, he was either eating or sitting on a couch and opening gifts. So
I guess if that is a surprise to you, though, then you wouldn't have been factoring that into the way that Trevor was reacting to Mason, the fact that he was on cocaine at the time.
No.
Okay. Does it change how you feel about that scenario?
No. Regardless if somebody was intoxicated or drunk, they don't deserve to be shot like that. Is that what you're asking me? Did they deserve to be shot?
So
Because he was high?
No,
I'm sorry then.
No, let me ask you. And I can understand if I gave you offense with that, that's not what I mean. What I mean is that sometimes you would agree that if somebody's on cocaine or they're intoxicated, that it can change their behavior, make them more aggressive.
I'm not a medical pro at cocaine. You know, I'm sure it affects everybody differently.
I understand that, and I guess, but you may not be a medical pro, but you are at a point where it would infuriate you to know that he was on it.
I would be extremely upset. I will not deny that at all.
Because of what's due to people, you would not want your son or anybody to have a drug like that in their system because of what it does.
Or any drug.
Sure. I didn't mean any offense. Nobody's saying your son deserves to die.
I understand that.
So, but you can agree that your son's actions that you witnessed, that those are important for us to, when we're making this determination.
Sure.
What your son did on the day that this happened. You can agree with that.
Yeah, high on whatever or not, I think he'd have done the same thing, because he was protecting me. That's probably how he's seen it. So regardless of what was in his system, I can't say that because he had cocaine in his system, that's why he walked up there, or if he didn't have cocaine in his system, if he wouldn't have walked up there. Because I think he would have, regardless.
And you said to protect you.
Well, because he focused his attention on me, and and then once he did that, I think that's probably what angered Trevor.
Well, this is okay, and it could have been, but this is one of the things I want to talk about a little bit about this. Is that you remember you talked to a detective same day, and it was recorded, right? Have you seen that recording?
I believe so. Yes. Is it the one where I'm in the apartment?
No, the one where you're in the interview. Have you seen that recording?
Yes.
Okay. So in that recording, that never once do you tell that detective that he said anything directly to Trevor, that he only directed it at you.
I don't recall that because he started yelling before he even seen me, and
well, that's what you said, but when you watched that prior recording, you actually said that he started yelling after you came out of the apartment and Trevor was halfway down the stairs. You don't remember that?
I don't recall that necessarily.
If you were able, because we can go and kind of go back and forth, but one of the things I'd probably like to do is just, will you agree with me that you'll go back and watch that statement that you gave 3 years ago? And then I'll call you back up here when it comes time for our case in chief, and we'll talk about some of those things that you said. Okay. But I want to ask you some of the other things, because when you talked to the detective, the only thing you told the detective at the time that Mason said was, "Your son ruined my life, and when you got robbed, it was him that did it." Okay. Now today you come in and you said that he was directing ill regard towards Madison, but you never said that before to a detective.
Yeah. It's probably
Is it because you talked to family members and Howie and other people about this, and that has perhaps changed your recollection about what you believe happened?
No, sir. I haven't seen Madison since Trevor's funeral. How he left, I haven't just. Their conversations with them hasn't persuaded. I know what I heard that day. I know it was because I remember it in the 3 phases. How he effing hates Trevor, with regard to Madison, and then to me. That's how it's ingrained in that's how I recall it that day.
That's right, and I understand that's how you testified to it. But back when you originally talked to detectives, this was right after it happened, right?
Sure.
And that your memory about what was said at the time surely would have been better than it is today.
Well, unfortunately, I probably didn't capture everything. It's different when your son's the one that went down in front of you than some other person you're reporting on.
I understand that, for sure. But some of the things that you testified to here now, the reason it's important that it's different is it keeps kind of sliding it to a little bit more Mason and a little bit less your son in the murder trial. You see how those statements that you're saying now are different, and it's a little bit more as if you were trying to block any self-defense claim.
Objection, Your Honor. Sidebar.
So,
Does that?
I'm sorry, I don't see that.
Okay.
Because I'm just conveying what I recall, or not. I'm gonna swear in the good book, and you're gonna get what I recall.
I understand. I mean, one of the things though is Your Honor, back process.
yes.
One of the things is that today you testified that your view was obstructed about what Trevor was doing as he was going in.
When he was reaching to the door, correct?
Yeah, your view of through the grate or whatever. And I guess my question is that because when you talked to the detective, you said you could clearly see Trevor open the door. Do you remember doing that?
I don't. And I remember it being obstructed, but I think I had it in my head that he did open the door, although I didn't physically see him grab the door handle and turn it and open it. I don't recall that. But it was illogical to me as my mind's trying to put this thing together that he did open the door.
Well, I understand, but specifically you said the door was obviously shut by the time Trevor got to the steps, went to his apartment, turned his doorknob and pushed it open. That's what you said to the detective.
Yeah.
And I think he may have stepped in the doorframe.
And that 100% no, he did not step inside.
Okay. But you see what I mean? Like,
Sure.
right after this happens, you're telling the detective, even though it hurts Trevor, you're saying, I saw him go up, open the door, and step in the doorframe.
Yeah, he stepped toward it.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper impeachment.
I mean, that's what you're saying to the detective right after it happened. Right? Because you watched it, so you know that that's what you said.
Yeah, I do know he took another step towards it, but he didn't step inside. Because I do know he did take another step toward the door, but he did not enter the door,
Well,
the door frame.
you remember when you're talking to the detective the day that this happened, saying that's what bugs me. If somebody comes in your house and threatens you, what you're saying is he's within his rights to shoot that person.
Yeah, I don't know the whole castle law, but if somebody physically comes in your house and charges you or is going to kill you, absolutely, I think you're within your rights.
Well, and I guess, and I'm not, because the judge will give the jury the law, and I'm not really asking about the law. I'm saying that statement, telling a detective that the day that it happens, if somebody comes in your house and threatens you, the guy's probably within his rights. That statement includes somebody coming into your house. You agree with that?
To an extent, sure.
And that's not a statement that you would make if you're positive, 100% sure he never went into the house.
Yeah, and I am totally positive he did not enter that house.
Then do you see what I mean? How that you would tell the detective like it bugs me because the guy's within his rights to shoot somebody if they go into the house and threaten them.
Mm-hmm.
You see how that
Sure.
And so if I can understand the father coming to testify at the trial 3 years later, it's a little different. But you would agree with me that telling the detective that on the day it happened is more consistent with what you actually saw. Would you agree with that?
To an extent, I would.
And so when you said that you felt like it looked like he stepped into the door frame, and then, it bugs me because the guy's within his rights if somebody goes in his house and threatens him. Those are things on that day that you obviously realize is not good for
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered.
Overruled.
that you realize isn't good for Trevor's position in this whole thing.
Right.
Because, going back to, you talked about, they were asking about your son's temperament. You said he's a jokester, he was a happy kid. But he was also diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
You said, is that
Yeah. Yes.
An oppositional defiance disorder is very difficult for parents because it means the child is angry, upset.
Now, I guess you say when he was diagnosed, he was, to my knowledge, no doctor ever diagnosed him with that.
If then the family believed that that's what he suffered from.
Maybe. I still don't agree with that.
Who does agree with it?
Who doesn't agree?
Who does? Because somebody.
Well, my wife, she's always the medical MD, and when she Googles something, well, maybe he's got
Objection, Your
that.
Honor, relevance.
But they asked about his temperament.
Overall.
Yeah, he's never been diagnosed with ADHD, AD, all the A's and the D's, or
Sure.
with this.
Well, and I mean, oppositional defiance disorder in particular, though, which your wife believed that he had, is it is one of the hallmarks of that is that the person does not follow norms, rules, and laws.
Objection, Your Honor.
What's your objection?
He's testifying on the expertise.
Okay, just get into your question, that's fine.
That's what that is, right?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, I thought you said it was fine.
I said to get into a question, and you say right, if you can answer if he knows.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know the definition of that diagnosis.
And this is what I mean. I don't want to make it uncomfortable. But I need to talk about these things because they touched on them first. So just like the obstructed view, this is one of those things that, like I said, to cause you any more issues. But I think it's probably better if you are able to review it again. But the entire time you talked to the detective, you never told the detective you had an obstructed view.
Yeah, because I had it in my mind, because it made sense to me that when he reached the knock, that he opened the door. I was convinced at that because his hand was reaching out that way, and it just made logical sense to me.
Well, and it kind of goes to the knock. Like, you never told the detective that that in your mind, he was even reaching out to knock. You were clear to the detective that he went up there and he opened the door, and then you screamed, "I'm gonna slap the shit out of you," when he opened the door and went in. That's kind of that's what you said to the detective at the time.
Objection, Your Honor. He's using the question to testify of evidence. It's not.
It's cross.
Okay, just can you continue to ask a question?
I mean, I guess that's what I'm saying. You didn't say that, like, my son was reaching out to knock on the door. You said before, what you said was that he reached out, opened the door, and started walking in while saying, "I'm gonna slap the shit out of him." Do you remember seeing yourself say that to the detective on that day?
Yeah, I guess I don't recall that. If I said it, I probably said it. I just don't. Obviously, the clarity of it, I can't capture everything in a however long interview, unfortunately, and we could just
to be clear,
pick it,
Just to be clear, I don't expect you to, and I'm not here to play like gotcha with you or whatever. But I really want, it's important that the jury understands that what you testified to or here on the stand today was either different than what you said before, or there's a lot more details than what you have.
Sure.
Okay. Let's see. So, I think at one point, so you hear the shots, and you're on, may I get up and move towards the area of the defendant for demonstration? I'm sorry, the witness for the demonstration.
That's fine.
And I don't like these. One of the things, because, have you dealt with an AR before? Have you held one, trained with one, shot one?
I don't recall ever shooting an AR.
Okay, what about a similar type of rifle?
M4.
Okay, that's a fully automatic with the military carry.
You can, yes.
Okay. So would you say just kind of in length and general dimensions, the M4 and the AR-15 are similar?
M4 is much shorter.
M4 is much shorter.
Yeah, it's more condensed.
So an AR-15 would be longer as a rifle.
Yeah, so yeah.
Would that be barrel longer? And I'm just asking because you know more than I do about the difference between them. But would that be barrel longer or like stock longer, or do you know?
I would say the M4 barrel's shorter, and the stock is much shorter on an M4 because it's designed for close combat.
In firing an M4 with a short barrel, if you were to fire it, do you know that like gunpowder and smoke and soot and stuff comes out of the end of the barrel?
Sure.
And the same would be with an AR-15.
I would imagine so.
And if somebody is standing over another person and firing a rifle, any rifle, the distance between the barrel and the person on the ground is not very far.
Objection, Your Honor.
Your objection,
I withdraw that objection.
Okay.
go ahead.
The distance between the barrel and the person on the ground would not be very far. You would agree with that?
Sure.
And you also know that that when a bullet is fired, it fires gunpowder and soot into whatever you're firing.
Yes.
And forgive me, I know that's hard because I'm demonstrating something that has personal things to you, but, or personal meaning to you. But when you testified that you heard shot, 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 and then you saw that Mason came and opened the door, and you said he stood over your son, and he shot 2 more times into your son while he was on the ground.
No, he didn't. The way you said it didn't make sense to me. He never opened the door and then shot again. No, the door was still open from the first 3 shots.
Okay.
So if I had said that, I completely botched that up.
That may have been me, because you may have never said that he shut the door and opened it up again. Whether the door was open or didn't open, what your testimony is that he was standing over your son and shot 2 more times.
I would say not directly over him. You know, I could see him in the foyer, but by the time he was done shooting, he was standing over him. You know what I'm saying?
Like moving in.
Correct. Not like standing directly over the top of him.
Okay, so he wasn't doing like an execution shot directly over the top.
No, he was back a little farther, but no, not standing directly over like.
And then boom, boom, and then coming in. And again, I'm sorry to act this out. I messed up. But that's how you would describe that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And so, do you remember him saying, because I don't think you testified to it on direct, but you said it to the detective before, that Mason, one of the things so now this has happened, and you're obviously very afraid for your family here, for your son here, and what's going on here. Does that make sense? But do you remember Mason at some point telling you, get him the fuck away from me?
Yes.
Okay. Now, that implies that Mason still believes that he could be a threat.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Can answer if he knows.
I don't know why would think that he was.
Well, I guess if Mason believed that he was dead, then it doesn't need you to get him away from him. I guess get him away from his house.
I don't know what he was thinking.
And that's fair. I'll take that answer. So, as far as Trevor's gun, did you know him to carry it frequently?
No, I knew he had one. He did bring that gun out to the house before.
And he asked, so he brought it out to the house. And y'all have like a shooting range out there, or like something that you shoot like cannons or something?
No shooting range.
So when he brought it out, how did he bring it? Like, how did he transport it?
It was in his vehicle.
Okay. Did he take it out of his vehicle and take it?
It wasn't like he never carried. I never seen him physically carry it on him like a open carry or something. Right. No, it was always in the vehicles out stored.
It just, I know it's lawyers and semantics, and it's not to irritate me, but the first time you kind of said it, you said that he took it out to the house. Did you mean he took it in his vehicle and had the vehicle out of the house?
To my house, yes.
Okay, but he didn't take it from the vehicle inside the house, or did he?
No, he brought it inside to show me.
Okay, so he brought it inside to show you. Do you remember in relation to Christmas Day 2021, do you remember when that was that he did that?
I do not know. Because he was always at the house, so it's hard to tell.
And so when you said open carry, for maybe some of the jurors who aren't familiar, the law is that you can't open carry and put it on a holster as long as you're not forbidden from carrying, like a holster on the hip kind of thing. Right?
That's my understanding of it.
And then concealed carry may be like, in the pants or a hidden holster or holster around back.
Sure.
A little shoulder holster or something that's covered, right? Because that's what you would consider the difference.
That's how I interpret it, yeah.
So when he walked the gun in, how did he walk it in? Is kind of my question.
No, he had it in a box.
was it, had you just bought it when you brought it up?
I don't recall.
So, you know, I want to go through immediately after the shooting happened. And you're trying to get into your family, you're trying to get in and make sure. You know, I've already told the jury, I mean, your fear is justifiable, right? That something worse is going to happen and could happen to you. You got upstairs and you went left, right? And you went into the apartment, to Trevor's apartment, eventually, right?
Eventually, yeah, yes.
And you said, I guess you told Howie or something, get the gun, because you knew Trevor had a gun somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Get the gun. Now, you said something about, I was anticipating him coming to Madison because of the ill regard.
Right.
Whatever that you said you'd shown for. But when you talked about this before with the detective, you never said that you thought that he was going to come after Madison or anything about really Madison at all as far as his ill regard.
Objection, Your Honor. House to answer.
It's just a little different.
Okay, just go ahead.
So, and I guess the issue is that even though anytime something like this happens, you being able to protect your family, you were afraid of Mason coming over there, is what you said. Right?
Yes.
But he didn't come over there, did he?
No, sir.
And in fact, you didn't know this, but at the time, he was in there on the phone with 911 himself, saying that he had killed Trevor.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't know that at the time.
No, sir.
Because you were rightfully so, you were going to be in a position to protect your family, right?
Yes.
And you were going to shoot anything that came in that door.
Well, to an extent, yeah.
Right. That felt like a threat to you or your family.
Yeah, after knowing what happened, yes.
Right. How far would you let anybody get at that door before you acted?
Well, I don't know if I would let them in the door.
Right. But if they did, the door open, do they have to go all the way in for you to act if you feel like they're a threat?
That's really a scenario you don't know.
The law knows, though, which is that you don't have to wait to be a victim, or your family doesn't either. And I think her quote was, if someone comes through that door, I'm going to shoot. That's what you said on direct examination.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, obviously, you have just witnessed and experienced something that caused you to believe that there is a potential threat. You would agree with that?
I thought there was a definite threat because the shooting already happened.
And it turned out, though, that the only person that Mason shot, or the only person he tried to, was the person that came into his house and threatened him. Right?
I still disagree with the coming into the house part, but yes.
But by disagreeing with the coming into the house, you agree that you're disagreeing with yourself 3 years ago talking to the detective.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper reason.
Just make a question.
Well, so, and that's okay. Just to make it clear, though, if you're disagreeing with that statement I made, I'm making that statement based on your witness interview to the detective 3 years ago, where you said he did.
Objection, Your Honor.
Isn't that correct?
So ruled.
Isn't that correct?
You have to repeat it because we.
Well, I said the only person that Mason shot that day is the person that came into his home and threatened him. And you said.
Objection, Your Honor. That one was asked and answered.
Well, he asked me to rephrase
I'll let
the
you finish the question.
And then you said, I don't agree with that statement. And then I said, if you do not
Objection,
agree,
Your Honor. Improper impeachment.
I'm now asking the question again.
Go ahead.
And I said, if you do not agree with that statement, then you are not agreeing with what you said to the detective 3 years ago when you told the detective.
Is using his question.
Judge, I get the state doesn't like me asking this question, but I'm trying to get it out first before.
That's fine. So ruled.
I'm still not following your. I'm sorry. I'm just not following your question.
Okay, I'll ask it a different way because I could be asking him again. You've watched your interview with the detective. People over there. I've told you, or I'm just repeating what you said.
Objection, Your Honor. I didn't question to testify.
Just let him ask a question first.
The door was obviously shut by the time Trevor got up the steps. He went to his apartment, Trevor turned his doorknob, pushed it open, and I think he may have stepped in the door frame. That is, I want to make it clear that you will accept
Objection,
you
Your
said
Honor.
that.
Improper impeachment.
It's cross-examined out loud.
Yeah, if
That's what you said.
Yeah, if I said it, then I won't deny that I said that.
And I would never put that to you if that's not what I'm reading from the transcript
Sure.
here. of what you said. So you agree that is a statement that he went into the door frame, or to be fair, that he may have stepped in the door frame.
I had the perfect view of him, you know, his upper body. I don't think he stepped in. I'm positive he didn't step into the door. That's just how I recall it.
I understand. But the perfect view that you're talking about, and this is where when we started this examination I wanted to get to, Your Honor, may I propose this? So it's kind of like you're saying you had a perfect view when you're saying that he didn't go into the apartment, but you had an obstructed view when you're saying you don't know if he's the one that opened the door or not. So your view gets perfect and obstructed based on how it helps or hurts a self-defense claim. Does that make sense that that's what it sounds like you're saying?
Well, when it comes to opening the door, you're talking a small portion, you know, that I just don't recall him physically grabbing it and opening the door. But as a whole person, I know he did not cross into that door. And as God is my witness, that'll be my testimony to my last dying breath, regardless of what I've said in an interview or how it's interpreted. Sorry.
And just so to go back to that, but when you were describing to this detective, you told him, that's what Butts did. The guy is in his rights if somebody comes in your house and threatens you.
Mm-hmm.
You understand and you know you made that statement.
Sure, and I don't think there's anything wrong with making that statement.
Well, obviously I do not think it's wrong. I think you're 100% correct, right? So I think it's correct. And I think that it's right. But what I'm asking about is that if that's not what you saw happening that day, when your son was shot in front of you, if you didn't see that happening, you wouldn't lie to hurt your son to the detective, right? You wouldn't say something to the detective that wasn't true that would hurt your son, right?
I will not lie.
And I understand it. But, so when you say...
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach?
What's your objection? No, what's your objection?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I'll deny, but move on because we kind of asked this one already.
I understand. And I'm only breaking it down to go back to the question that I have, which is the only person that Mason shot is the person that went into his home and threatened him.
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered.
He asked me to
Sustained.
So you were concerned and you set up. You did not know that Mason was on the phone with 911 when you guys were on the phone with 911.
Yes, sir.
Right. That is something that you would do. Somebody would do if they were just in an incident or a traumatic incident where they had to use deadly force. It's called 911, right?
Sure. Yes.
Right. There was never at any time, and Mason had opportunity, there was never at any time when he brought a gun barrel up and pointed it at you.
No, sir. He didn't. He never pointed at me.
There was never a time that he threatened you with it.
No, sir.
And before Trevor went up the steps and went to his door and opened his door and said, "I'm going to slap the shit out of you," Mason never threatened Trevor with his gun.
Not that I've seen, no, sir.
Or that you witnessed.
No.
Mason could have easily come out and got with that gun on that step at that door. He could have walked out the door and shot him right there. right?
Sure, yes.
But he didn't. He didn't do that. You would agree with that?
I agree.
And the did any, well, so we can get an idea, John, I have questions to this. So what you're saying is that at the time that Mason is yelling, which you say to the detective is, your son ruined my life. To the time he gets, Trevor's down here, and you're halfway down before Trevor starts to move back up.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so he starts to move back up at what you say is, he starts to move back up at what you say is, the time you got robbed, your son was the one that robbed you.
Correct. Like all the times that you were robbed.
All the times you were robbed?
Something of that nature, yes.
Okay. But he didn't tell you, like, Trevor didn't tell you, like, you know what, Dad, that's the last straw, I'm going up there.
And Trevor didn't say anything to me.
He just turned back up and went to here, and you kind of continued down the stairs, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
And when you heard him say, I'm going to slap the shit out of you, or you want to get slapped again, or whatever else, when you heard him say that, it was only then that you heard gunshots.
About five-ish seconds after that, yes.
So he's standing at the doorway with the door open, as he's opened it, and you said 5 seconds or so.
About that.
Okay.
It was pretty fast, about 5 to 10 seconds.
I mean, 5 to 10 seconds, right? And so 5 to 10 seconds, you would agree, if somebody has opened a person's door and is standing in the hallway or standing in the doorway even, or has a foot almost in or whatever else, 5 to 10 seconds is a long time to contemplate what kind of threat this person is, right?
I would say 5 to 10 seconds is plenty of time to assess a threat.
And it would be plenty of time to go get a gun and then meet the person that's coming into your home. Generally, does not imply, or 5 to 10 seconds does not imply the person has the gun already there.
I don't know if he had the gun though.
Well, and the reason I'm asking that is because you didn't hear Trevor say like, whoa, 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 what are you doing with the gun or whatever.
You know, and that's funny you bring that up, because that's always haunted me, is why, you know, he never defended himself, you know, because the natural reaction is, you know, get in a defensive position, put your right foot behind your left and twist your body and put your hands up, and it was never that. Right, because if you're going in on offense and somebody turns around with defense, you may not even expect that, right? And that could be. Well, correct, but he wasn't going in. I mean, he was clearly standing right there at the door. You were aware that Trevor had slapped Mason before you knew about that? Not after the fact, I did. I didn't know that. I mean, I knew you're not the one that telling me. I mean, I discovered that well after the fact. Yeah, I think you said it to the detective. So somebody told you that day. Yeah, because I didn't know it before the incident. Okay, but were you aware of why Trevor slapped me? I thought it was because he was hitting on Madison. I don't know the exact circumstances of it. Okay. Did you know that in fact it was because Mason had called the police because Trevor had been hurting Madison? I don't know anything about that. Okay. Judge, I'll pass it.
So, on cross, specifically, you had no knowledge of your son's drug use, correct?
That cocaine, no, that's
That's the
That's
first
a-
time you ever heard of it.
that's a shock to me.
But when you arrived, you did say that he had to come open the door to let you in.
Trevor did. Well, Howie's the one when we first arrived for the
Yeah, when
day.
you first arrived.
Yeah, Howie was the one that opened the door and let us in.
But then you were in with Howie and the family, correct?
Correct.
During that time, did you ever see your son do any drugs?
No, and I know he would never do it in my presence if he was doing it. Obviously he was, but
Why wouldn't he do that?
because I would come unglued.
Why is it obvious that he would? Okay, with what you just said, why is it obvious he was?
Because I forget his name, because he told me the autopsy reports that it was in his system. The cocaine was in his system, so
Because of
obviously
that, you just believe the defense counsel?
I do.
Well, it's also just true. I have the report that we do.
I guess I don't know.
They make a legal objection, right?
I guess we can also say that we all agree it's true. It's true. Yeah.
You haven't seen any sort of autopsy report, have you?
No, sir.
Okay. And he wasn't acting like you thought he was on drugs?
No, he wasn't acting out of the ordinary. I mean, I would never, and I suspect that stuff as a guy that's, I take pride in this. I have never even smoked a joint in my entire life. I've done 0 drugs. And I would not have suspected that 1 second. I'm floored.
Okay, but
to hear
you
this.
don't have any knowledge of that. This is the first time you heard of it, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So that morning, was your son's behavior as you guys arrived there erratic?
No. He was perfectly normal to me.
Was it aggressive?
No. No, sir.
So he wasn't acting out in any way in the morning?
No, sir. It was his joking, normal way. It was a normal morning.
And you said he wouldn't have done drugs because you were there?
Correct. He would never do it in my presence.
In your presence, okay. So you didn't see him do drugs?
No, sir.
You didn't see him acting erratic?
No, sir.
You didn't see him being aggressive before the incident with the defendant?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, so moving on to one of the other points about your statement. That statement's not in evidence right now, correct?
Which statement? I'm
The
sorry.
one that the defense kept reading from it, that hasn't been entered in that evidence?
Defense will offer that statement at this time.
You agree to offer?
Yeah, we would love to put the video.
Okay.
The video?
Yeah, it's a video. I don't have it on this, but we'll offer it. So,
Let me get a 10-minute break.
all right, for the jury.
After nearly a week of testimony, closing arguments are made to the court.
I have a few points. We all just heard the jury charge, which is this series of papers. And I want to very briefly talk to you guys about it first, because it's a lot. And the first thing I want to point out is this very first page, which says the charge of the court. And it is on this first page that the charge of murder is defined. And on it, you will read that our law provides that a person commits the offense of murder if he intentionally or knowingly causes the death of an individual, or if he intends to cause serious bodily injury and commits an act clearly dangerous to human life that causes the death of an individual. Now, what's fortunate about this trial, as opposed to other trials that happen in this building, is that throughout this whole week that we've been here, that hasn't really been contested. Whether or not Mason Lubitz killed Trevor Beeman is not a question at hand because of all the testimony that we've heard. Everything about this case lies in that next part of the jury charge, which is where we talk about self-defense and we talk about provocation and everything like that. And so the very first thing I want to tell you guys is this very first part, this is the murder portion. And so this isn't really what we're arguing about today anymore. Now, I also want to give you a heads up about how everything's going to kind of play out from here. Obviously, I'm talking right now, so I'm going to go first. After I finish and I sit down, you're going to hear from both defense attorneys and back to back. And then lastly, you'll hear again from my colleague, and we're going to talk a lot about self-defense and provocation and everything else. But before I sit down, I want to talk to you all about how there are certain things you've heard in this case that should be sitting at the back of your mind. And everything that you're about to hear from them, there should be something else sitting in the back of your mind that says, well, hold on. That's half of it. Over the course of this week, we heard so much about how the defendant was afraid and he was terrified. At the back of your mind should be the one fact that says, if you're afraid, if you're terrified, why do you confront the person? Why do you seek that out? Because behavior doesn't match the emotion. It doesn't fit. It should be in the back of your mind. And the back of your mind should be that photo, those photos of Trevor Beeman lying lifeless outside of the apartment. The blood pools, the blood stains, everywhere the blood went. Everywhere. It should be in the back of your mind. Because a lot of the arguments you're going to hear about, well, he must have gone in, the body doesn't tell that story. It doesn't fit. And that should be in the back of your mind. Now, also in the back of your mind is every single time that we've heard in this trial, the defendant referenced Trevor Beeman dying. Whether he said he wanted Trevor dead, or that he thinks someone thinks Trevor deserves to die or needs to die, or every time he referenced murdering someone or wanting to murder someone, or I'm going to kill somebody, or I hope he dies, or I would have killed him then, or I'll kill him in front of his girlfriend, I'll kill his girlfriend in front of him. Every single time he said that, it should be in the back of your mind. And they should be in the back of your mind because those things were true before the murder, they were true during the murder, and they're true after the murder. And nobody can change that. Those things should be in the back of your mind because they're half of every single point that they can try and point out to. Every single aspect of this case that they can point to, half of those truths are, well, what about these other things? And it should be in the back of your mind the entire time. It should be in the back of your mind because at the end of the day, after I sit down and they sit down and my colleague sits down, those things are then going to come to the forefront. Because those things are the reason why when you do go back there to deliberate and you sit down and you talk about it and you try to remember everything that was said and how it was said and is the way that they said it really what they said? Because you only get to hear those things back if you disagree on what you remember what was said. When you're back there now, After hearing all of that, those things that are in the back of your head are the reason that you're going to come back and find him guilty of murder. Thank you, guys.
Please the court and ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you haven't heard as much from me during this trial as you have from Jason, but I'm going to get up and give you the beginning part of the defense's argument. I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes about the law that is in the charge, because that law that the court read to you, that is your Bible going forward in making the decisions in this case. That is the only law that applies in this case, and those are the decisions that you are going to have to make. And by the way, in case nobody mentioned it, you will get a copy of that charge, so don't think you have to memorize everything the judge just told you. So you will get a copy to take back. The first thing, and what I think is the most important general concept that will apply to your decision-making process, is who bears the burden in this case. Always the state. Now that's easy when it comes to, well, have they proven murder beyond a reasonable doubt? Well, I do agree with my colleague that murder, whether a homicide was committed, is not at issue. What's at issue are the defenses in that charge, whether it was justified. And who bears the burden in those? The state bears the burden to disprove those beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant, this is from the charge, the defendant is not required to prove self-defense. The state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant did not act in self-defense. And I say that's the most important thing, because that's not usually how we reason outside of courtrooms, but it is absolutely essential to the process and to our system of justice. So the burden of proof, how does that really operate when we're talking about self-defense? Well, you might remember this little chart from jury selection. And well, if you think it may not be self-defense, not guilty, possibly not self-defense, all the way through, well, it's probably not self-defense, still not guilty. Less than likely self-defense, not guilty. What if you think it's highly unlikely that Mason acted in self-defense? Still not guilty. It's only when they have proven that it's not self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt that the law permits you to find Mason guilty of this crime. So what that means is not sure, not guilty. Now, the law doesn't allow us to tell you what beyond a reasonable doubt actually means. The state says it's not beyond all doubt, and they're not wrong about that. If something was proven to you beyond all doubt, well, you probably witnessed the event, and you wouldn't be a juror, you'd be a witness up there on that stand. But suffice to say, if you have a doubt in your mind as to anything the state has an obligation to prove, and you think that doubt's reasonable, that means not guilty. So the justification of self-defense, we call these things defenses, but they are more properly termed justifications. And what it means is Mason is not guilty unless the state has disproven beyond a reasonable doubt that he reasonably believed, as viewed from his standpoint. That's another important point. You're going to have to actually view all these things from Mason's standpoint, because that's the perspective that matters here. That Trevor Beeman was using or attempting to use unlawful deadly force against Mason, and Mason reasonably believed, again from his standpoint, that his use of deadly force was immediately necessary to protect himself against Trevor's use or attempted use of unlawful deadly force. Okay, those are things that the state has to disprove to your satisfaction. Use of deadly force cannot be in response to verbal provocation alone. Now, a threat saying, you want to get slapped again? That's different than verbal provocation. Trevor's threat is different, and you have to consider everything that happened before between Trevor and Mason, including that October 4th assault. But let me tell you how this decision process is going to be simplified. Those two elements, 1 and 2, they are presumed under the law of this case. So the way the law of self-defense works is it's different inside your home. It's different if someone has entered or is attempting to enter your home. And the law says, well, that presumption, that issue, well, was the person reasonable in using self-defense? Was the person reasonable in thinking that someone was going to use unlawful deadly force against him? Well, the law says if it's in the home under certain circumstances, the law makes that decision for you. You do not have to make that decision. So the presumption of reasonableness, how does that apply? Well, presumption is a fact that is to be taken as true, and the court's charge uses the word must. You must find. If you find certain circumstances, you must find this presumption to be the case. So The presumption says that under certain circumstances, you are to presume that the defendant's belief that deadly force was immediately necessary was reasonable. And I can tell you right now, we do a fair number of these murder cases. Not many of them happen in the home. So most of what our juries are trying to decide is whether the defendant's use of deadly force was reasonable. If you find this presumption applies, I'm not going to call your decision easy, but it is greatly simplified because the law has already made that very hard decision for you. So, again, the state bears the burden to disprove these things, such that the presumption will not apply. So you must find it to be immediately necessary and reasonable unless the state has proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Mason either know or had reason to believe that Trevor Beeman unlawfully and with force entered or was attempting to enter. We heard a lot about, well, did he actually enter the apartment? Was he shot outside the apartment? Was he entering? Was he attempting to enter? If you believe that Mason had a reason to believe that Trevor Beeman was attempting to enter his apartment with force, that's all that required. And by the way, just real quick on the matter of force. Now, force can be applied in a number of ways. You'll remember Jason's example where he walked through those gates. He manipulated the gate with his hand. That's force. It doesn't have to be kicking in the door the way we saw the officers did. That's one force. Force can also be turning a doorknob and pushing a door in. Force can also be pushing open a partially closed door. That is force. It's just physical manipulation of another object. Was attempting to enter Mason's habitation. I don't think anybody's disputing that this was Mason's habitation, this apartment that he lived in. And the state has to prove that Mason disprove that Mason provoked the person against whom force was used. Now, provocation, that's going to be something that you're going to hear them argue a lot, and you're going to hear Jason respond to that as well. But I want you to bear in mind what provocation means in these arguments. Mason was not otherwise engaged in criminal activity. I don't think they're going to argue that he was. That's part of the law. But Mason, he wasn't dealing drugs. He wasn't doing anything that was actually any kind of illegal activity in that apartment. So that part's pretty easy. Okay, another part of the defense, part of the jury charge is the deadly force in defense of property. Again, this is when the state has the burden of disproving beyond a reasonable doubt. So they have to disprove that Mason was in lawful possession of land. I think land here, that's a word we use. It just means real property you have a right to possess. So land includes apartments. Apartment dwellers are entitled to the same defense as people with big ranches are. They had to disprove that Mason reasonably believed that force was immediately necessary to prevent or terminate Trevor Beeman's trespass on the land. What is trespass? That's entering or attempting to enter without your consent. That's all trespass is. Trevor did not have permission to enter that apartment or attempt to enter it. He was attempting to commit a trespass. Also, Mason believed that deadly force was immediately necessary to prevent Trevor's imminent commission of burglary. Now, we usually think of burglary as theft, breaking into somebody's house to steal something. But in that jury charge, you're going to see it also includes unlawfully entering someone's habitation with the intent to commit assault. And that's why you've heard us arguing about assault, and you're going to get a supplemental charge on assault. Because assault can include threatening to injure somebody. It can include offensive contact, slap to the face, whatever it might be. Remember, do you want to get slapped again? And either the land cannot be protected by any other means. There was no egress to this apartment beyond that front door. And the use of force, other than deadly force, would have exposed the defendant to a substantial risk of death or serious bodily injury. You'll recall those videos of Trevor boxing. Well, he wasn't wearing gloves today, and you saw how hard he could hit with it. Mason saw those too. Okay, I'm about to sit down, but one thing I do want to point out in this charge is the Fifth Amendment right. Now, the judge has instructed you that you cannot or must not refer to the fact that Mason didn't testify. That's a Fifth Amendment right we all enjoy if we're ever unfortunate enough to find ourselves in the seat that Mason's sitting in today. And I've actually found over the last 20 years that jurors are remarkably good at following this instruction. But I do want to point it out. We tried to present you with a defensive case that gave you the backstory. Remember, we brought in Jenna, who told you a whole lot of stuff that that Mason saw Trevor do that goes to his reasonable belief and everything that he knew. We also brought you Spencer, that's Mason's brother, who was able to fill in some of those gaps and corroborate some of the things you heard Jenna testify. But the fact that Mason didn't testify, law says you can't hold him against him when we ask you, please do not. Okay, I'm about to sit down, And Jason's going to stand up and give you the remainder of the defense argument.
This is the first thing I told you guys. Trevor Beeman's actions caused and was responsible for Trevor Beeman's death. In the trial, what we've seen throughout the trial is that. It is that fact that has gone through everything. And now, the prosecution said, well, there's always going to be this thing in the back of your mind. There'll be this thing about provocation. There'll be this thing about this. And we'll talk about a few of those things. But ultimately, what Patrick told you guys is that when we get to the end of this, there is the presumption. The presumption means that regardless of whether Trevor had a gun, whether he didn't, whether he thought he might, whether he could have. I mean, anybody who knew Trevor, as you've seen in throughout this trial and how that's developed, could assume that he did, right? But regardless of that, what the presumption says is that anybody coming into your house, no matter what, if they're doing certain things, like using force to enter, meaning they're coming in unlawfully, and they're threatening at the same time, anybody who's doing that, it is presumed to be reasonable that they're about to use deadly force against you. It's the protection that we have for our homes. And I think all of us know that. I don't know that any of us, before you came in today, before I practiced law, before any of this stuff, I don't think any of us had a doubt in our minds that people can't come into your home. That people can't come into your home and threaten you. And that if somebody does come into another person's home and threatens them, then that person is within their rights to use deadly force. I know that Mr. Beeman knew it, and we're going to talk about that. I know that he understood it at the time while he was watching what was happening. And that's one of the most important parts of this, is how are they going to overcome a presumption, and how are they going to overcome a burden when their eyewitness, who is the person deceased father, felt himself at the time that Mason was within his rights. So let's talk about that. First, Mason was telling the truth. That's one of the things that have kind of come out through this. It just feels like, he's a little odd, right? I mean, he's a little different, neurodivergent, a little strange, the way he talks, the way he tries to explain what happened, all of those things. And it seems like to me that because of that, they said, we don't care. We're not going to listen to your concerns. I mean, he's literally 6 feet across from somebody. And now, from the beginning of the trial, when you heard the Beemans testify, when you heard Mr. Beeman, and look, I told you, I have respect for Mr. Beeman. I don't think he's a bad guy, right? Obviously, there's a lot about his son he didn't know, right? But Mason knew it because he had to live next door to him. Jenna knew it because they had to hear it go through the walls every night after night. This guy is beating his wife. He is beating Maddie. He's hurting her. Maybe she's beating him. But whatever it is, when you're hearing it through a wall, it's disturbing, it's terrifying, it's scary, it's violent, and you have cause for concern. So what do? They do it. Call Spencer. Call brother. What do we do? She's over here now. She's seeking shelter in our house away from him. He's like coming over and beating on the door. And Spencer said, look, they go back a lot. So what'll happen is you got to call the police, but be careful. Because you can call the police and then she'll go back and then where are you? Where's Jenna? This guy's mad. He's angry. He called the police on a violent guy doing violent things. But they did it. And then what did you hear? The police goes over and goes back. When we had our first baby, my wife, she drove to daycare and there was always a police officer that sat there. And when you have a baby, everything kind of goes crazy. Her registration expired at the same time. And I couldn't get there to get it redone. And she couldn't, obviously, and she's trying to take him to daycare. She's starting back at work. And this police officer would pull her over every time, for her expired registration and gave her a ticket, and she says, look, we're trying. My husband, yeah, okay. Where's that guy? That guy that's pulling her over for that, where's he when Trevor's beating the crap out of Maddie? Where's a guy that actually cares that he's going to follow the law? Where's that guy to go into the apartment and say, hey, there's got to be a girl here? No, two guys there say, only males, all males, only males, all males. Maddie's in the back. They don't even look in there. So now you have Mason. He's telling the truth, but nobody cares. He's telling the truth, nobody listens.
I think the fact that really so many videos can beat the shit out of people. So scared my size. What color hair does he have?
He can fight real good. He's shown me videos of him beating up people twice my size, and he's got weapons. Well, what are we You know, some people do that. Nobody's here to say, oh, it's a horrible person, backyard boxing, whatever. You know, I haven't been to one of those. Maybe some of you have, maybe not. But it's not the point. The point, I'm not showing you this to say, oh, he's so bad. I'm showing you this to say he can be dangerous when he wants to. I'm showing you this to show Mason told the police, I've seen this guy. I know that he can cause a lot of damage with his fist. I know that he can cause a lot of damage to me. I can't go against somebody like that. He can fight real good. I watched him beat people. You know, and if any of his language or my language, the language you've heard in the trial offends you, I apologize for it now. Please don't hold it against him. It's just, I mean, people talk like that sometimes. But in this particular case, he's telling the police that, and then it turns out, look, we have it, right? Like everything he says, guy, he hit me here. Police didn't do anything. They didn't follow up. They didn't arrest him. They didn't investigate. They didn't really do anything until December 22nd. They gave him a phone call. But then Maddie came in and told you everything. All of that was true. Everything that Mason is saying is true.
Fuck my glasses up. Fuck my face up. As far as I feel that's always fair. People are threatening me. So you're wanting to suppress charges? Oh yeah. And I'd like to also. Can I now add testimony to him beating his wife during this? Am I allowed to do that? I have no idea what to do. I'll say, call me the fucking stand. I'll tell you everything myself.
Okay. So he's telling the police officer. You know, I don't know, but maybe the police officer can maybe say like, well, hold on, let me get you in touch with a detective or somebody. A woman's getting beat up. I don't think they believed it. You know? That has to be what it is, because it's not normal. It's not normal for a police officer to hear that somebody is beating up their wife and not want to know anything else about it. Well, if they don't believe them. But then, of course, Maddie comes up and it's true. Everything that he was saying is true. And so when he says he's terrified of Trevor, the prosecution wants you to go, well, yeah, that was true what he said. Yes. Oh, and that was true what he said. And oh, that was true what he said. And oh, that was true what he said. But don't believe that. And that's wrong. It's wrong to do. It's wrong to say. It's wrong to argue. It's wrong to say he is telling the truth. Oh, but you don't know if his dad really said this thing about killing him or whatever. And look, here's the other thing too. One of the things about a case like this is when you have this much volatility, and he's honestly talking to a police officer saying, yeah, I want to kill him. I don't know anybody who gets slapped like that and doesn't want to kill the person, right? But he said, I didn't. I did not do that. He said, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. But I will not let this man do something to me to where I could get hurt or killed. And that's it. So if he goes, yeah, I wanted to kill him. Well, then later, of course, it looks like, oh, hindsight, oh my gosh. And he did kill him. But that's not how this works. We don't go, oh, he said it before and now he did. And so that must be that he was planning on doing it, because it ultimately comes back to Trevor Beeman's actions. Trevor Beeman's actions, solely and alone, were responsible for his death. Because by going up to this man's apartment that he had terrorized, and he had terrorized and assaulted, and Trevor was just ready. He's going to show, I guess, to show his dad, show whoever. This is the guy that slapped around out at the apartment. Mason wasn't going to get slapped again. He wasn't going to get hurt again. He wasn't going to let anybody come into his home and do that. And that's the right that every one of us have. And you may say, well, maybe he could have done something different. But that's not what the law says. The law is not talking about what's the most ideal thing. It's does he have the right to not be convicted of murder for these actions? And Trevor doesn't go in there. Trevor's fine. There's no dispute in this case that Trevor Beeman was a violent man. The state's own witnesses came and told you that Trevor was a violent man. Any man who beats his wife like that, any man who does that is a violent man, dangerous man, somebody that if you're his neighbor, you would be concerned about and you should be concerned about. That's it. And no dispute. He beat his wife, he assaulted Mason, he's skilled in hand-to-hand combat. There's no dispute about any of these things. He owned a firearm that he'd carry on and show off and carry in his waistband and everything else. Right? We know that for a fact. Maddie told you. Mason told everybody that would listen. But Maddie told you as well that that is true. And then Jenna told you as well that she saw it. There's no dispute that he was a drug user and drank alcohol. What is important about that? An 8-ball is a lot of cocaine. It's just a lot of cocaine for 2 people. It's a lot. So if they finished it all that night, maybe they did. I don't know. But that means they got an 8 balls worth. That's 3.5 grams. Like a big old, like that, of cocaine that they're snorting. Christmas Eve, before the family all comes the next day. And not just that night. Remember, they didn't go to bed till 3, 4 in the morning, right? So this cocaine and this alcohol, whatever, if he didn't wake up and drink, he's still drunk from the night before. He's almost to the point where he can't drive. He's so intoxicated after having slept, apparently. And we don't know that. You know, these are questions that don't have answers. And we talked about it in More Dire. If you have any questions at the end of this, it is them that has to answer those questions, right? The state has to answer any questions. Well, did Trevor do it that morning? And it really doesn't matter, just to give you an understanding that, like, look, this guy, like, not only is there no dispute he's violent, is there no dispute that he's violent to Mason, but he's also doing things that reduce inhibitions. And it makes you do stuff like run up in some other guy's apartment, open the door, and threaten to assault him. Bad move. It's always a bad move. It's not the right, reasonable, rational thing to do. I don't care what Mason was saying to him or to his father, because the things that Mason was saying is not something that would provoke a normal, reasonable, rational person to go into another man's house and threaten to assault him. You know, it would. What's that? I don't know. You guys mad at me? I slapped it. Now he's screaming. Whatever. That's what normal people do. Or, like, oh, something wrong with him. You go inside the house or whatever. He's obviously pissed off, Trevor. What'd you do? Oh, I slapped him. That's why he's pissed. I slapped him. They're so scared that they had to leave their apartment for 2 months. And then he thinks the one day that he can come back and move out. And we're all here. Because the whole family, what do they keep saying? We decided to be humble. Like, I don't even understand that. Well, we wanted to have a humble Christmas by all gathering into this apartment. But they also told you, and it's clear, that there's no reason to expect that he would be there, that Trevor would be there, that the family would all like crowd into that apartment that Christmas. Turns out that they weren't. It's a tragedy that they did. But ultimately, there's no dispute about these facts. They're not going to come up there and tell you that. So, what Jim Beeman saw. Here's how we know what he actually saw. Because he went and talked to a detective that day and told him. And you heard me, and I got it out. When he testified, he saw something different. You also heard me talk to the detective he talked to, and the detective testified, no, the only things he said were these things. There's a lot of stuff added in 3 years. I'm not here to say anything about it. I get it. I understand it. Right? Like, there's a lot of stuff he had to say on the stand that I'm sure it was hard to say. Right? That may not have known that what he said to the detective on the day of. But that does not mean that, oh, well, we feel bad about that, so let's convict him of murder when he did not. Because if you look at what Mr. Beeman saw, the first thing he said to the detective when he's describing it, and I went over this over and over with him, but the door was obviously shut by the time Trevor got to the steps, went to his apartment, turned his doorknob, and pushed it open. That's what Mr. Beeman said to the detective about what he witnessed, feet away from what's going on. And I think he may have stepped in the doorframe. And then Trevor, I thought he said, you want slapped or something. So what he is describing right there is a burglary of a habitation. That's what he's describing to the detective watching his son do. That is a burglary of a habitation. That is your presumption. He is describing that Trevor unlawfully used force to go inside this man's apartment, and he may have stepped in the doorframe. Okay, so if he may or he may not, that's a reasonable doubt. And where do reasonable doubts go? That's against them. They have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that he didn't. In their own witness, the eyewitness, the father of the person who died, this is what he said to the detective. He said something different to you. And I think we can all understand why. We know that Mason did not and could not have opened his own door. So I know that there was some suggestion that maybe it was like he walked up there and he was going to knock and like Mason opened the door and shot him like that. There was that kind of suggestion, but we know for a fact he didn't, because all the forensic evidence proves the shots were fired from a distance, farther than at close range. All the forensic evidence proves that. You have these shell casings that are grouped here. Somebody with a half wall, that's why I was talking about it so much, who's right at the door is shooting. Those shell casings are going to be bouncing and staying in that hallway. They're not going to group together all back in this living room, suggesting that the person was back at the living room or a little in front when he fired. They won't do that if he's right at the door doing that. So that's the first thing. Second, gunshot wound. No evidence on any gunshot wound in close range firing. That's the only reason with that medical examiner. You might go, why are they going through it so much? It's because you know for a fact he didn't stand over him and shoot him. You know that because it would be way within 3 feet, the end of that muzzle to the body. And there's no evidence of that. But you also know for a fact that he didn't open the door and shoot because he's still within 3 feet. That would be evidence of close range firing. You clear the rifle around the door and you shoot. You would have close range firing from right there. You would have to. So that's not what happened. And we know that's not what happened because the door was obviously shut by the time Trevor got to the steps, went to his apartment, turned his doorknob and pushed it open. The day of, right then. That's what Mr. Beeman saw. That's what he saw happen. And it's true. That is what happened. And then he said later on to Sergeant Henning, that's what bugs me about this. I mean, the guy, and I clarified, I said, when you said the guy, you're talking about Mason. And he said, yes. The guy is probably within his rights if somebody comes into your house and threatens you. That's what it is. And then they go, and everybody goes, well, maybe he doesn't know. He's not a lawyer. He doesn't know the law. He's an eyewitness. And that's his child. And I'm telling you this, it has to be true because nobody would say that about after just seeing their child shot. Nobody would say that unless that's really what they saw. That's it. I mean, I was thinking about it, I don't care if my kid ran in there with a gun. Guy should have shot, right? That's the first reaction. And that means that Mr. Beeman's an honest man when it comes to that. When he was talking to that detective, he honestly said what he saw. There's no way that he would lie about that. So if the eyewitness says he's probably within his rights, and they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he wasn't, when there's a presumption that he was, Mason is not guilty of murder. Because if you found him guilty of murder, you would be saying you are guilty of murder even though the person who was killed's father told the detective he thought that you probably were within your rights. Probably within your rights is not guilty. Probably not within your rights is not guilty, right? Even if he came as, I don't know, maybe, probably not, probably. Those are all not guilty. That's not beyond a reasonable doubt either way.
They're right outside on the doorstep. Okay, let's do it. Okay, man. Okay, let's do it. You stay where you're at. Whatever you want. You stay where you're at. You stay where you're at. He fucking threatened me. He's saying was him. He's the only one.
So what makes him scream is he came into my apartment and he's threatening me. And what did Mr. Beeman say? He's coming into his apartment, threatening him. How's Mason screaming that? Knowing, he didn't know that Mr. Beeman was going to be the witness that backs up what he's saying. He's screaming that to the police officers at the time. He came into my apartment. And look, all of this, everything, it's obviously emotional. It's emotional today. It was emotional then. Please don't hold that against him. Because how he reacted after this happened, we've had more than enough testimony from all the officers and everybody who's ever seen this, that when you shoot somebody, you never know what they're going to do and how they're going to react. So, but one of the things you can tell is that doesn't look like a mastermind. It doesn't look like somebody who that doesn't look like somebody who was like, oh, this is a great, well thought out plan, and then I'm going to put the gun over here, and then I'm going to scream like a madman, and scream things. And that's not a plan. That's somebody who is reacting to having to do it. And honestly, when you listen to them and you listen to the things that they put in, not wanting to. And we'll talk about it a little later, but what is he saying? I'm so mad at your department, you let me down. That's what he said. I'm mad at your department, you let me down. That's somebody who says, I don't want to be here. I didn't want to be in this situation. All I wanted was somebody to protect me while I was doing this. And when he's in the interview room, that's one of the things he says. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But Patrick showed you this. So it goes back to look. Look, if we look at where Mr. Beeman's statement is, probably self-defense. That's what he told the detective. Watching this happen, it's probably within his rights. Probably self-defense. So he's all the way up here on this chart. Not guilty. This is just the bottom half of this chart. This is the stuff where you say it may not be, it possibly not, it's unlikely, it's probably not. Those are all not guilty. But the witness was already, it probably is. And what did he tell Sergeant Hennig? This is important because they made a thing about, oh, there's this provocation. The provocation means that's what it is. You would have to find, just like in the situation, you would have to find that if I said, hey, slow down, jerk, that's provocation for him to follow me home and go into my house. And then I couldn't do anything because I go, oh, I'm sorry. I said, I'm sorry, watch where you're driving, jerk. I have to be killed now. I can't use self-defense. That's not what that means. But look, three things. And it's important when I said he told Sergeant Hennig, because this is the day it happened. Because what Mr. Beeman told you in trial, and as he testified, was that Mason had said other things. But those are not things that he ever told the detective at the time. Why is that important? Because after 3 years, his memory has changed, and it has added things that didn't exist before. And what did they add? What did it turn? The three things he told Hennig that he ever heard Mason say is, your son ruined my life. When you got robbed, it was your son that did it. I hate him. Who's Mason directing that to, according to Mr. Beeman at the time? All at Mr. Beeman. None at Trevor. Why? Because he knew Mr. Beeman. He had had a conversation with Mr. Beeman. And he wanted to tell him, I'm in this situation, and he's telling it all to Mr. Beeman, according to Mr. Beeman, talking to Sergeant Hennig on the deck. Now, how did it change? He started directing things to Maddie. He started directing things directly at Trevor. He started talking to Trevor, talking about Maddie, and doing all these other things because they want to build in your mind this idea that that's a provocation. Because this alone, it's something where, you would go, what'd you do to him? He's obviously pretty mad at you. And that's it. People walk away and they don't even think about it again. That's not what happened. And then they kept saying, well, why would he even yell anything at him if he was scared? If he's so terrified of Trevor, why would he yell? If he's so terrified, he must have been to provoke the guy to come in. Here's the deal. Jim Beeman was there. Now, you got to think about this. At the time, he does not believe that Trevor is going to do anything while Jim Beeman is standing, while his own father is standing there. That is not a reasonable person could look at that. And I'm not saying, you could say, well, he probably shouldn't have yelled at him. This wouldn't have happened if he wouldn't have yelled at him. But that's not the analysis is it reasonable for what was yelled at him to cause him to run up into somebody else's house? And that's not reasonable. It can't be. But you can say, he probably shouldn't have. But this is the reason is because Jim Beeman's there. He's standing there with him. So you have to assume that this guy is not going to go and do this in front of his own father. He knows the Beemans. He's been to their house. He knows that these are citizens. He knows that they are not the same as their son, right? Obviously their son has got issues, violent, and everything else, but he doesn't think that this is going to happen. And so he never thought that. Nobody would. So he's saying, your son ruined my life or whatever. Trevor doesn't do anything. Trevor doesn't go up there. Trevor doesn't go in. Trevor doesn't open the door. Trevor doesn't say, you want me to slap you again? You want to get slapped? You want me to slap the shit out of you? Or whatever it was that his father said he said. He doesn't do any of that. Nobody gets hurt. How do you know that? Because Jim Beeman was sitting right out there right after his son was shot. He said he saw Mason again. Did Mason shoot him? No. Did Mason shoot Trevor as he's walking down the steps? Did he come out onto the balcony and shoot him? No. Did Mason go into the other apartment and start shooting? No. He didn't. The only person that got shot, the only person that got killed that day was the only person that went into his apartment and threatened him. That's the only person that got shot. Nobody else. Mason had clearly the opportunity, if he wanted to. He didn't want to. He didn't want to shoot Trevor, ultimately. But he was going to shoot Trevor if Trevor came into his home and threatened him, because the law says you're allowed to do that. And you should, because you are presumed to believe that they are coming in to hurt you, maybe kill you. That's it. But of all the things that they try to say, like, oh, well, if he was setting it up, then why do that? Why not just kill him? Oh, well, he wanted an excuse. He wanted to be able to say, thank you, Judge. He wanted to be able to say, oh, he came into my home. Right? Oh, that's what. But you cannot say by yelling these things, which are emotional things that he's upset about, but not things that tell the person, like, come up. You know what that is? Why don't you come up here? Why don't you come up here? Why don't you quit being a little, oh yeah, you slapped me before. Why don't you come up here and try it again? Right? Though that's provocation. Why don't you come up in the house and do it? Why don't you come up to this thing? Why don't you fight here? Why don't you? He didn't scream at you that. He didn't yell at you that. It's not provocation designed to bring Trevor up there into the house. Nothing Mason said would have caused a reasonable person to go to another man's apartment and threaten him. Open the door, use force, do all this stuff. And they're going to go, well, why didn't Mason lock the door then, right? Like that's their big reveal, I'm sure. Why didn't he lock the door? Because he's shutting the door, not thinking that this guy's going to come. But I bet you what did happen is once that door opened, or once he heard it up the stairs, he did go get ready. Because the way the dad described it is, it's like, if he heard that, then yeah, he's going to go. But he wasn't going to shoot one person. Never would have. Not one person that didn't go into his apartment and threaten him. Not one person. And he didn't. Trevor was not acting like a reasonable person. Oh yeah, and this. It might be catching. Man, here's the thing about that. That detective, the nerve, honestly, the nerve. SAB doesn't believe him ever. Then they don't go get it tested. Then they come in and tell you it might be ketchup. Well, it might be ketchup. It's easy and convenient. But imagine how terrifying that is if you're ever called to have to use force or deadly force in defense of your home, and the police don't do the investigation, and then they tell a jury that has been seated to decide whether or not you committed murder that it might be ketchup because we didn't test it. How terrifying. But ultimately, what he's saying is that, I don't know, could be Trevor's blood, could be ketchup, could be Trevor's blood. I don't know. You know what that is? It's a reasonable doubt. You know what that is? They can't rely on that. They can't tell you it might be ketchup. They can't say, we don't know. They're talking about, well, we don't know if he entered or not. No joke. Because they didn't test to figure it out. Because guess what? If that's his blood on the inside of the wall, there's pretty good evidence he was in the apartment. But like Patrick told you, the law doesn't require he go into the apartment. All it requires is you open the door and you threaten somebody, they can hit you right there. They can, because you don't have to wait for somebody to go in. I asked Mr. Beeman, I said, what were you going to do to the next person that came in the door? He said, I was going to shoot him, the next person that walked in. And he would have the right to in his situation. Even though there was no danger from Mason, they had a reason to be careful. They had a reason to believe. They had a reason to be cautious and everything else after what had just happened, but not because Mason was in the wrong. But that's how it goes. If somebody even steps a foot in, that's it.
You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Judge. Sergeant didn't testify the person doesn't actually have to come in your home. The SAPD did let Mason down. They failed to really investigate or take seriously the problem that Trevor was causing. They failed to offer Mason assistance to the department, and that was something he could do, the civil standby. They failed to do any of that. And you still have this guy terrified of this man who is justifiably terrified. I don't know anybody sitting in this courtroom who wouldn't be terrified of that guy if he's your neighbor. I don't know anybody who wouldn't be. So that's reasonable to be terrified. And it comes back down to this chart. Ultimately, when you go back there, no matter what they say about provocation or anything else, they have not proven beyond a reasonable doubt, able to overcome the presumption that Trevor was not doing it. And it all comes back down to Trevor's actions caused Trevor's death. And the main witness about what Trevor's actions were is Jim Beeman. And Jim Beeman told them at the time that Trevor came in there, opened that guy's door, and that he was probably within his rights to shoot his son. That's it. If you convicted Mason, you would be convicted of despite his father, Trevor's father, saying Mason was probably right to do it. And that's a heavy burden. Mason does not deserve to be convicted of murder. And we're asking that you find him not guilty. Go through the problem, go through the issues, go through the judge's charge, and when you get to the end of it with the evidence, we're asking to find him not guilty, because he is not guilty of murder.
Trevor Beeman caused his own death solely and alone. That's what the defense told you. But you know that's not true. You know that 7 rounds fired through this rifle is what caused Trevor's death. We're here to decide whether that's a murder or not. You know that 3 rounds went through his neck, 1 went through his left arm, 2 went into his chest and stayed there, 1 went into his pelvis and stayed there. That's what caused Trevor's death. As we told you previously, there's no dispute that we've met the elements of murder. They're not fighting that. He caused the death. He caused serious.
I'll just object as far as murder, because that's
the elements of a murder, Judge. So the question then becomes, is this self-defense? There's a couple things in the jury charge. The secret sauce is on page 12. Having proved the elements of murder, was it self-defense? Was it defense of property? The answer is no. The answer is guilty. On page 6 of the jury charge, defense talked about this, the presumption. The presumption of reasonable belief applies unless the state proves beyond a reasonable doubt that the facts giving rise to the presumption do not exist. Person who provokes the difficulty is not entitled to self-defense. So when defense got up here and told you we're going to talk about that, he was right.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that. If we can approach that has been excluded from the charge, that language is specific.
Literally number 3 in the jury charge in 2 places.
So we're just found that language should not. That language is excluded from the charge. Provoking the difficulty.
The presumption was. So we agree, right?
I understand it on provocation, but provoking the difficulty is that's a specific part of the law that they went over in more dire.
Okay, he's going over what the charge does.
And if this is not a case of self-defense,
I'm sorry, Judge, may I have a ruling? Thank you.
And if this is not a case of defense of property, then this is a murder. We go back to those elements that we proved early on, that nobody disputed, that Mason Lubitz caused the death of Trevor Beeman. Defense of property, I think most of you have heard lots and lots about self-defense. Defense of property, maybe it surprised you that we're talking about that. But the one thing I want to really emphasize on defense of property, your Castle doctrine, is that there is no presumption of reasonableness. I don't have to overcome that presumption. Was it reasonable to shoot a man in this circumstance? And I think the facts clearly show that a reasonable person would not have done that. And I think the facts also show that Mason Lubitz was not acting the way a reasonable person would. Did a burglary even occur? We're going to talk about that a little bit, but they want to talk about assault. You heard the definition for an assault. But you also heard from testimony that there are other things, such as criminal trespass, that doesn't make a burglary, terroristic threats, a conditional threat. Do you want to get slapped again is different from, I'm going to slap you again. I'm going to slap you again is a threat of assault. Do you want to get slapped again is not. That is not an assault, that's not a burglary. Was shooting a man unarmed 7 times reasonable? No. Defense of property doesn't apply here. Let's talk about self-defense. When to the degree the actor reasonably believes that deadly force is immediately necessary. Was Trevor Beeman using unlawful deadly force? No. Was Trevor Beeman committing a kidnapping, a murder, a sex assault, an aggravated sex assault, a robbery, or an aggravated robbery? No. So he doesn't get those unless he gets the presumption. The only way he's reasonably entitled to self-defense is if he gets the presumption. That's what this case is about. And he only gets that if he did not provoke the person against whom the force was used. So I've got 2 things for you. Did he enter? No. Was he committing a burglary? No. Did he provoke? Yes. I'm talking about James Beeman, Trevor's father. Obviously, it's difficult to be in his circumstance. I can't even imagine how difficult it would be to see something like that happen in front of you. A lot of this case, a lot of the closing argument, went about what did Jim see? What did Jim say he saw? What did he say he saw? Mason poked his head up from behind the door. He didn't step onto the landing. He poked his head around. Why was he poking his head around? You can draw inferences from that. Could it have been because he had a rifle strapped around him, ready to go? Trevor took the insults for several seconds. Regardless of who they were addressed to, they want you to believe that he came out here and said something completely different. You saw that laundry list of things that he said. Literally the only thing different from what he said at the time is mentioning Madison. But I hate you, you ruined my life, your son robbed you. And at a certain point, as he said, Trevor had enough. Trevor had enough when he directed those insults at James and said, your son was the one who robbed you. It's not even true. James told you he's never been robbed before. But you know what? On Christmas Day, when you're a 24-year-old man hosting your family, trying to impress them with what you've made of yourself, your new job as a member of the Army National Guard, and somebody's doing that in front of you, you react. Provocation. He never entered Mason's apartment. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but the evidence shows that he never entered that apartment. He fired several shots from inside the apartment, and then he said he fired 2 more as he closed the distance. He didn't say he stood out there and fired through him. He said he fired several from within, and then approached and fired 2 more, consistent with everything you see in the autopsy. Mason was purple-faced with anger, yelling about his son, about his son's girlfriend, about his father. And again, I want to remind you, it's not, I'm going to slap you, or I'm going to slap the shit out of you. It's, do you want to get slapped again? So we're talking about the situation. What would a reasonable person do? A reasonable person on Christmas Day, barefoot with his dog outside, with his dad there, would want to confront somebody that's saying things like that to him, to his father. That is reasonable. He wants you to believe he's his son, so he's changing his story over and over on cross-examination. That was the theme. His shadow was set 7 times in front of him. He was afraid for his entire family. He was interviewed less than 2 hours later, so I think you heard on cross-examination, like, well, you were in shock when you were on the scene and they talked to you for a few minutes, but 2 hours later, clearly you're fine. No, it doesn't work that way. You're not fine 2 hours after your son is murdered in front of you. That's just not the way it works. He said his vision was obstructed. So they want you to say, well, he clearly turned the knob and pushed the door open. Fine, they want to say that. That is what he said. I don't disagree with the statement he put on there. But he said that he assumed that's what happened because that's what made sense in his mind at the time, 2 hours after the shooting had occurred. But his vision was obstructed. And ladies and gentlemen, look, there is somebody at the bottom of the stairs you can't even see. This is from the door frame. There's a basket. There's a skeleton hanging from Halloween, which was never taken down. There's a bush. There's a light pole. There's the railing. There's lots of things in the way. Everything's consistent with what Jim said. He testified that he just fell straight down. You know from the autopsy that his cervical spine was severed and he fell right down. Absolutely consistent with something that James said. James, again, who has seen combat, has seen men die before. There's a single spot of possible blood that defense want to talk about in the left there, but it's mucousy, it's weird looking. Is it blood? Is it spittle? Is it body matter? I don't know. There's also 2 spots of blood on the door, which again, as the detective testified, we don't know if the door was 45 degrees open or 90 degrees open or whatever. Blood spatter, you heard about that. If somebody's shot standing outside the apartment, their blood will spatter. But what's important is where the blood ended where the body fell. And that shows you where he was standing because he fell right down, right where he was standing. Also consistent with what Jim told you is that 2 additional shots were fired. And if you look at the bullets that did not exit the body, the 2 to the chest, the 1 to the pelvis, the wound paths moved from right to left, which is consistent with somebody. You saw where James fell, where Trevor fell rather, and you saw that's consistent. If somebody's walking towards that person the way he fell, door here, on his back here, those are consistent with what James testified to. That's where the body fell, 100% outside. What did James tell you? He doesn't know how it was open, he knows that it was. Evidence certainly suggests that Trevor either turned the knob and pushed it, or it was cracked and he pushed it. Certainly that suggests it, but he's not here to tell you that. He's here to tell you what he saw. He said he never went inside. What did he say? I think maybe he stepped into the doorway or the door frame. I think maybe. The defense keeps going. Well, he thought this. He thought it was okay. He thought it's totally justified shooting if somebody goes to your house if they're within their rights to shoot you. But again, Trevor never entered the apartment. James is not a specialist in the Castle Doctrine or danger zone. And he was not talking about this case. He said, well, that's what bothers me. If somebody does this, I think you get to shoot them. Anybody who's seen a TV show, Law and Order, would have the same understanding. Living in Texas, many of you may be gun owners, believe in the defense of your property, of your house, of yourself. In jury selection, most people agree with that strongly. That's not what this is about. This is about the specific circumstances of this case. We're not talking about whether Castle Doctrine should exist. We're not talking about whether stand your ground should exist. We're talking about, did Mason provoke a confrontation to commit a murder? If he's coming in here to lie to you, to make it look like a murder, why is he going to tell you things that don't make Trevor look good? He told you he went to the door, he assumes he opens the door, and that he asked him, do you want to get slapped again? Those are not the things you say if you're trying to make it a murder. Those are the things you say if you're trying to tell the truth as you remember it. What about Trevor? A lot of attacks on his character. He's not here to defend himself. His family loves him. They spoke highly of him. 24-year-old, just joined the Army National Guard, wanted to host his family on Christmas. So much about, well, they could have gone to the big house. They wanted to be humble. So what? He chose to host his family and they agreed. And that's the situation that the defendant knew he was in when he chose to confront him. He chose to open that balcony door. It was the insults directed towards the family that led to that response. He's out barefoot with his dog. That's not a guy looking for a fight. That's not a guy looking for a confrontation. That's a guy walking his dog in the morning in front of his dad when somebody tries to start a situation. Again, I talked about this at the beginning. His actions caused his death. 7 bullets caused the death. Was he drunk? No. The only definition for intoxication is the loss of your normal mental faculties, or 0.08, too drunk to drive. He's below 0.08. His family testified he seemed perfectly normal. He was high. That's not true. You heard from the doctor. The cocaine was below the detectable quantity. They've got a threshold where it's a positive result and a negative result. And what their result was, there is cocaine in the system. It's not high enough to quantify. Just so you can see what I'm talking about. Cocaine in the fentanyl undetected. Cocaine, or opiates undetected. Cocaine less than the limit of quantitation. And again, 0.062, 0.064 below the legal limit. Not drunk, not high. Hungover? Maybe. Look at the blood. He shot outside the apartment. You heard at one point that Mason picked up the body and moved it. That doesn't track. That body fell right there and stayed right there. There's not 2 pools of blood. There's no blood on Mason's clothing. All of it's outside. Aside from those 2 droplets on the door and that 1 droplet of potential blood on the inside. What I want to tell you about, in addition to this, what I really want to point out, we know he was shot standing outside the apartment because the physical evidence shows you that it was. He was shot 7 times. 3 bullets went through him. 2 went through and through on the neck. 1 went through the left shoulder. And this window, immediately to the left of the door, has 3 bullet holes in it. So you know those through and throughs went through that window. We talked a lot about the layout. This is the landing here. This is the half wall here and here. So you're like basically a hallway right here. And we know that the casing is ejected to the right or back to the right and ended up in this living area. If Trevor's standing inside this apartment, those bullets can't curve. Those bullets can't go through that window. What that tells you is he was standing outside. And when it went through his left arm and it went through his neck, as he's turning the door, leaning in, boom, 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 threw him through the window. That means he's standing outside, just like the blood confirms. Where was Mason? Well, we know he can't be standing where these buckets are, so he's standing back here. Again, if Trevor's standing inside the doorway and Mason's standing here, those bullets are going to go straight. They're not going to go through that window. Let's talk about Mason. Christmas Day, pulled up in a U-Haul, showed up with nothing but his rifle, low ready. Consider his behavior, consider what he says before the shooting, during the shooting, after the shooting. From the day, October 4th, to Christmas Day, I want to kill Trevor Beeman. It says it many times to many different people. Anybody that will listen, he tells he wants to kill Trevor Beeman. It's not self-defense if he provoked it. We know he killed Trevor before. He insulted his wife. You can't beat me like you beat your wife. That was enough to draw his confrontation, to draw that slap or that punch, that assault. We know that he tried that again because James testified. He said, I hate your son, he ruined my life. I hate his girlfriend or his wife. That wasn't enough until he started addressing Trevor. So, when that didn't work, when he got you before the well, he tried something new and it worked. Words alone can't justify an assault, but words alone can be provocation. And I want to emphasize that to you because he knew how to push his buttons and he pushed his buttons. That's what he did. He got what he wanted. What happened? Mason was emasculated. You heard from his girlfriend that masculinity is real important to him. And he was emasculated when he got slapped or punched and embarrassed on October 4th. You heard that he spent 3 months living from hotel to hotel, motel to motel, because he was stewing on what had happened to him. You heard that he initiated the confrontation with Trevor and with James. And you heard that he built the biggest, most baddest AR he could, and he brought it back. Why did he bring it back? To help him move? Is that what they want you to believe? Are you allowed to have an AR? Yes. Do you need an AR to help you move? Absolutely not. Think about the 911 calls. And to be clear, ladies and gentlemen, I know we got a snow day, a holiday. You're allowed to review any and all of the evidence. There's 911 calls. There's a few we didn't even play for you. The videos you can watch again if you choose to. Listen to the calls. You can hear from Calnita. You can hear from Howie. You can hear from Mason. What I want to tell you is what Mason says. I was assaulted by someone with a gun. Was any gun used? No. Does he know what that gun looks like? Does he know the brand of the gun? Absolutely. That's consistent with somebody who showed his friend the gun that he has. That he knows this Istanbul company. That's not consistent with having a barrel pointed at you. You can't see the make of a barrel when it's pointed at you. I feel like murdering someone. I'm going to fucking kill somebody. Trying to convince the cops that Trevor is a dangerous person and will shoot at them. December 25th, furious. I just killed someone. There was this guy in my doorway and I had to blow his brains out. I'm on fucking murder adrenaline. Think about his statements. He made 3. He made the video statement, he made the written statement, and he made the audio statement. A demon lives in that apartment. Trevor's a demon. His dad, James, says he's a piece of shit. I hope he does die. Come on, really? He did not put a gun at me when he punched me. I would have killed him, but he had somebody with him. He was trying to instigate so he could shoot me. On October 4th, he's talking about the pretext to commit a self-defense. And he's projecting that idea onto Trevor. But who really had the idea about instigating a conflict so he could justify shooting him? That was Mason's idea. I would kill her, I would kill him, I would kill him in front of her. Talking about Madison and Trevor. I could get on top of that guy and end his life. And again, defense even showed you part of this. Call me to the stand so I can testify about how he beats his wife while making faces, winky faces at the camera. I'm trying to get something more satisfactory. What did he want? Exactly what he got. The opportunity to kill Trevor. His written statement, his father and his roommate both think he needs to die. He turned my life upside down. This is what I'm talking about. He spends days, 3 months stewing on what happened, about how he was emasculated and made to feel less than. He is not bulletproof. We know that's true. The audio interview from December 22nd. This has ruined my life. I could ruin his life if I wanted to. Trevor had a murderer with him. You're not going to beat me like you beat my wife, and then he socked me in the face. I don't like to be fucked with, and I'm capable of serious brutality.
That's different. That statement never changed evidence.
It is.
If the jury would call it testimony evidence.
You can listen to the statement. Are you going to assemble your AR? Yes, I'm going to assemble the most badass AR I can. This is Texas. I'm allowed to protect myself. 3 days. 3 days before, I'm allowed to protect myself. because he knew he was going to start something. From December 22nd, I wanted to kill this. Also from December 22nd, I wanted to kill this guy. I should have killed everyone. They sent kids to break the cameras. What are we even talking about here? They put a green light out on me, but an angel let me know. Is this the actions of a reasonable person? I don't think so. I need this done with. I'm out of options. I'm going back on Christmas Day. He didn't request a civil standby, but he did resolve this. He did get this done with. He's furious. The only thing he cares about is his dog. This is his statement to Detective Henning at the police station. Last night I put the AR in my apartment. I'm allowed to bring my AR. I had every right to do what I did. I did everything right. I just killed somebody I shot him to. He's got a checklist and he thinks he's made all the checks on his list. Think about the shooting. He has to know the family's there. You heard from testimony that they came in several cars. They had food, they had gifts, so it took them several trips, maybe 15 minutes of loading and unloading to get into this apartment. And we know that Mason's watching the apartment because the second Trevor comes out for the first time that morning, he's there. He opens the door. James testified the door was open and he was yelling before James had even left. So the defense wants you to think he was only yelling at James. That's just not true. Mason was poking out, purple-faced, angry, and Trevor was halfway down the stairs when Jim came out. Afterwards, after he gets he insults him, insults his girlfriend, insults his dad, just the door doesn't lock it. We know he can. You know, in those photos you see it was deadbolts, and they kicked in the deadbolt and then tore up the door frame. And afterwards, he does everything he can think to prevent himself from getting shot by law enforcement. I'm going to put the gun down, I'm going to take my clothes off, which is not a normal, reasonable thing that a person does. But is it effective? I think the cops agreed it was unusual, but certainly would make them feel more comfortable. I can't disagree with that. Again, you can draw a rational inference from why he closed but didn't lock that door. Defense keeps apologizing. They're doing it in opening, they did it in closing, they're doing it throughout the trial. Keep apologizing, explaining why Mason would be upset after the shooting. Because they know that's not the behavior of a normal, reasonable, rational person.
Yeah, I should objection, striking on the shoulder, counsel. That's reading into my motives or whatever else. That's not
I'll allow us to argue to yours for both.
You heard the officers testify about how unusual his behavior were in years and years and dozens or hundreds of responses. They never seen anything quite like it. And he knows that behavior started well before the shooting. Because again, he was angry from the moment he opened that door and started yelling at Trevor and James. If he's scared, why did he come out at all? He's obviously watching through the window. His own girlfriend, Jenna, came in to testify on his behalf. Probably knows him better than anyone else. Does that sound like the behavior of someone who's scared? No. Jenna says that doesn't sound consistent with what he told her over the phone, by a text message on October 4th and October 5th about how scared he was. She doesn't think that sounds consistent with somebody being scared. He's a lover, not a fighter. So what do you think about him going into the biggest, baddest AR possible? Does that sound more like a fighter or more like a lover? Well, that sounds more like a fighter. She agrees. He wasn't scared. He wanted to fight. Trevor didn't enter Mason's apartment. Trevor didn't assault Mason. Conditional threat only. Terroristic threat at best. Not a burglary. Mason is therefore not entitled to the presumption. If he's not entitled to the presumption, and if Trevor's not trying to murder him or commit a kidnapping or sexual assault or any of those things on that list, and he's unarmed, which you know he was unarmed, then he's not entitled to use self-defense, deadly force to kill Trevor. He's just not, and that's the way it is. Additionally, even if that was true, we know that Mason knows how to provoke Trevor, and that's exactly what he did. He provoked him to do exactly what he did. He kept antagonizing him until he responded, at which point he shut the door and backed up, ready to go. He instigated the October 4th confrontation by calling him a wife beater. Spent 82 days between October 4th and December 25th stewing on his feelings of shame, embarrassment, and emasculation. And he instigated the Christmas confrontation by yelling hate at Trevor, at Madison, and at James. He knew the bait was taken. He closed the door. When the door opened, he was ready to go. 7 quick shots. Boom, 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 boom. Trevor's dead. And the physical evidence confirms The window, the holes in the window, the body, the blood pooling. As soon as he opened the door, he was going to die. And it's tragic that he took the bait, but he did. What did Mason say? He did everything right. Like he's following his booklet, he checked all the boxes. But he provoked the difficulty. He's not
just objecting to the language. I know the court's rule, but I mean, preserve it. And then could have a running objection. That's fine. I don't have to object. That's fine. Thank you.
Christmas Day 2021 was not about fear, it was about rage. This is the only thing that he brought back when he came to that apartment that day, was this rifle. And you heard from James' testimony, furiously angry before, you saw in the video furiously angry afterwards. And you heard, when he was obviously dead, that he came out again, and he stood over the body, and he kicked it. And he said, "Get him the fuck away from me," because he was still mad. He was furious about being disrespected, and he thought that he could get away with murder. And I'm asking you to look at the facts and make the conclusion that he did not reasonably fear for his life, that he's not entitled to the presumption to use deadly force, that what he did on Christmas Day was a murder. And I'm asking you to convict him for murdering Trevor in front of his father. Thank you.
After almost a full day of deliberation, the jury found Mason Lubitz not guilty in the murder of Trevor Beeman.